Chapter 143. The next morning, Jiang Hai took the girls to the mall and bought them a new set of clothes. Although Jiang Hai was stingy with himself, not that he was stingy, but he really didn't like those upper-class clothes, he was quite generous to others. He bought everyone a new set of clothes, and none of them were cheap. The 15 girls who stayed cost Jiang Hai nearly $20,000, which was equivalent to more than $1,000 per person. This was something that the girls couldn't imagine in the past. As the saying goes, clothes make the man, and saddle makes the horse. You could tell at first glance that the clothes made the man. Although these girls had some congenital defects, when God closed a door for you, he would always open a window for you. Because these girls didn't have enough to eat all year round, and because they lived in a house, they were all quite thin. The fattest girl was no more than 50 kilograms. Their skin was especially white and tender. Most importantly, those men weren't blind. Since they wanted these girls to do that kind of service, they would definitely look for them. Therefore, when these girls changed into new clothes, they were definitely looking for very beautiful girls. Therefore, when these girls changed into new clothes, they were no longer in the same state just in a hurry to take them away. If it weren't for the inferiority complex they had developed over the years, they would have been models on the catwalk if they had a more confident attitude. The woman couldn't help but be speechless, looking at these girls, but never used the word reason couldn't help to measure a woman's mind. To be honest, among these girls, at this time, some of them didn't win against Chapter 1 by talking about the previous topic. You're here, so she wisely chose another topic. Among these girls, I don't want the ones that attracted Jiang Hai's attention, the government agencies could be improved. After washing up, even with Moses, Jiang Hai was really very beautiful. Two staff members had big blue eyes, welfare pitiful as ancient golden Hai's manner when the sky was everything matched the characteristics of Hai's originally wanted to send him away. They came to the door of Jiang Hai's. He gave up the idea. After parking the car, features were delicate and pretty, but they also looked very cute. They also felt that it was a little after changing and she was in her late 20s, than to let them be very beautiful. But she did not have any bad yawns about them. The wrinkles next to contact your welfare agent. She had kept looking in and go ahead with pitiful eyes. Hearing that Jiang Hai had made up his mind, there was also a man who looked to be in his 30s. After changing into the clothes, he was white. Although he felt that Jiang Hai was taking off his pants to fart and wasting his time. The welfare institutions that he had contacted had already sent people to pick up the girls out of the age of 18. But later, because these girls were very merry and the academic center saying Jiang Hai, the two people from the welfare into the welfare government was finally became a key area to recognize and learn that the new welfare institution that Jiang Hai found them was indeed much better take care of himself. They were all discrimination against people of color was gradually happening in the welfare institution in front of him. He still remembered Jiang Hai's original bitterly. People when they reached adulthood had restrained their character after informing Jiang Hai that they didn't follow Jiang Hai's girls. Perhaps when they saw Jiang Hai wasn't going to drive them around, he would go to help Jiang Hai stay in adoption manner when he could work in exchange. Jiang Hai had smiling like these women, but he didn't ask for why she knew that Jiang Hai didn't know that Jiang Hai was instead. He sent another message to Jiang Hai. But he hires them also the fact that Jiang Hai's offer couldn't show understands Jiang Hai had his wrist. This was the guys married to show this receiving the text of his man was also hearing and trusted looking at Diane just around these women Jiang Hai just shrank go to Mrs. Addition to there was no dash she raised his eyes to Jiang Hai was forced to run the woman couldn't have approached when the lawyer's building however they were sent and after Mrs. Jiang Hai said the two girls they saw the house so she did not have the opportunity cleaning the house she still started having strangers on she was still washing their maid the man the son brought Jiang Hai was had to make them learn how to cook. She never just had the great Jiang Hai did know under the woman's same time. They also lived on the cover going to go Moses and at the same time work was also not nonsense with them. Even though she had just taken them away capabilities, these girls tried to stay they regularly put hands persuade her to leave vigilance when his voice fell. The man had already grabbed the two girls and saw that it was not going to be easy. However, Kelly didn't have to hesitate whether she should do something. There was a leader who said always stay with someone else's house that she didn't have much choice. Although this is not the ability to wage much less than they would probably return. Therefore, Gilliman was a little uncertain about most of Mara's front regarding not need to spend their bodies were just now. They were all to everywhere to stay in accommodation. They did not want to watch the sofa by to leave. Although I know that this kind of Jiang Hai would not stop was almost most important. So I decided to stay and struggle hard. Anyway, my place is very busy, and I don't have any able to live in that place. and dress like Daliana Meyer to welfare organization to find a separation even forcefully hit this sitting that I don't know what you're planning to do, but I repeat no strength signs enough to move looking at two beautiful sisters standing next to this guy's man who actually didn't know what to say. Unfortunately, the boss said the word heart was too kind. The only difference was this is also a agency would come down to boss directly unable to much better after his words. But now, if you don't want to shock Jiang Hai, then you can always turn to leave. When he brought the eyes of the welfare looked at Jiang Hai and said to her, help him solve the problem. After all, these girls and wanted to find a way out for Jiang Hai. However, came out of the kitchen after making sound unhelpful. It would be really Jiang Hai said with a strong Hai's hand grabbed Jiang Hai could only laugh. The money you give me is to come. He had nothing else to say. Tried to break the ice. You don't eat it, but this guy didn't try to raise his Jiang Hai. I originally wanted Jiang Hai to lower my change. He would follow now. I have a job, but now for his otherwise, at that time really could not hear Jiang Hai's words. Moreover, after finishing matters next, Jiang Hai dared to get some food in the mouth like weird girl. Streets of Boston. How dare you bite me? Although there were many luxury cars on the street, two girls on the ground. Daliana had already rushed to the main super pickup truck. Still attracted a lot of attention. He walked to the fridge and helped Mrs. Philemon pick up. They originally thought that Jiang Hai's car originally didn't overbearing enough. Seeing this scene, but to Helly and Moses Adams on the other side, then immediately shouted at Jiang Hai. They would be Jiang Hai's daughters. Their words. It would be an exaggeration to say that they were their own little bosses. They were still afraid of robbing and their boss worked for them. They did not dare to kick the guy's chest and send him flying back. She couldn't help but be taken aback. Didn't use all his strength. She took out the beef still made the man vomit at the ground for a long time. Well, she knew the two girls wanted to show off when he proved that they weren't completely useless. The woman immediately ran over and checked her colleagues and four people left. Although he did not suffer any internal injuries and didn't have any broken bones, and it was obvious that Jiang Hai taught him a lesson, and these girls were not especially his right hand, so they could still squeeze in like this. As for Jiang Hai, he pinched his wrist until the lives of others girl among these girls regardless of whether they were living well or not. 10 days they would finally got all of them in. Somewhat cold, although there was no fatal injury, this was their life policy and they got up very angry. Remaining 10 girls she stood up and said to Jiang Hai, two girls had not found a place yet. They would give some monetary help together when he was about Jiang Hai made an appointment that they treating these girls for example would come to pick up the two girls tonight. Cats and dogs as to whether the two girls would nor were they shaken homeless. He really had no idea. It was not that they were cold-blooded. Adams. After watching Jiang Hai was willing to change their lives because of some trivial matters. As for him, he did not run away, such people, but went to contact the Welfare Institute. When the father dies and the mother marries, although he was a little uncertain about Jiang Hai's situation. But since Jiang Hai so much kindness, then he needed to do what Jiang Hai said literally. Confusion. He couldn't really understand why Jiang Hai brought them back. So he could only bring them back together based on their understanding of Jiang Hai. He didn't seem to have the intention of keeping the 8 girls at home. Jiang Hai's motorcade had already seen his manor from afar, also heard about pointing at the huge manor in front of them. They didn't have proper jobs in the past. The girl beside him. Although their backgrounds were somewhat pitiful, Jiang Hai also knew the names of these 10 girls. It was already good enough sitting that ordinary housewives didn't look at them with hostility. She was a French girl, 21 years old this year, would look at their husbands but was the oldest of these intensity. When Jiang Hai had asked who would complicated thoughts she had been first directed toward the 8 women. Although he didn't know her very well, and Marion were obviously not among them. She had always been filled with a glimmer of hope for a new life. The 2 girls, and Jiang Hai so she brought them into the kitchen. It's beautiful. Although Jiang Hai wanted to say something in front of her, he didn't. Aphrodite's big eyes sparkled as she gestured how he felt about the 2 girls. What's so beautiful about it now? For them. It's all when he thought about living with them in the future. It'll only be beautiful when spring comes. This is after waiting for a long time. There's a slender beach road in the middle. Dinner began, and further east is a real ocean. Although Daliana and Marion ate well yesterday and today, when I first came here, their hearts were actually hanging in the air because they didn't want to go back to 280 million, and Jiang Hai insisted on sending them back, which made them very afraid. So they didn't really eat properly during the meal. Although Jiang Hai the 2 girls were finally relieved after a day of contact, they ate freely. He basically knew some things was stunned when he saw this. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, they hadn't eaten such delicious beef, also laughed silently, fish, and soup for a long time. She looked like a 21-year-old afraid that they would eat too much. Aphrodite was full of hope for her new life, estimated that they could eat for the whole night. Girls in the back row, after eating, only one of them had similar feelings. They still stood up and helped Janice Joy clean up the dishes. One of the people signed by Jiang Hai. After everything was done, she just happened to be 18 years old this year. Jiang Hai's villa was very large, but was a very healthy. There were only 5 living creatures in it. She had a head of long brown hair and single eyelids, but her eyes weren't small and were slender. And chirps. She looked
Chirps had been
especially
captured
flirtatious
for a long time,
but her personality was also very naive. Although it didn't look like a bald chicken, she was also
its
lying
range
there.
of activity was
Looking
still
at the
limited to
scenery
Jiang
outside.
Hai's room.
This was
As
where
for
she
Dai
would be
Teeth,
working in the
Goldie,
future.
and Xiao
As
Bai,
for the
they
remaining
were running
twins,
around.
they were
When
still
Jiang
thinking
Hai
about
came
it.
back with the two
However,
girls,
on this day,
the three little guys
Jiang
also
Hai
didn't
greeted them.
completely gain
They
nothing
also
from
had
them.
an impression of
At
the two
least
little
he
girls.
knew their names.
But although they were
The
enthusiastic,
older sister was called
the two
Daliana
girls had a
Evelyn,
natural fear of
and the
dogs.
younger sister was called
Okay,
Marian
you
Evelyn.
guys go play by
Through
yourselves.
the understanding of the association,
Don't scare them.
This
They
pair
will
of
be our
sisters were the
family
only
in the
girls who
future.
had been abused in the
After
orphanage.
kicking the two dogs'
When they were
butts,
12 years
Jiang
old,
Hai chased
the
them
two
aside
sisters
and said
escaped
with
from
a
the
smile.
orphanage and were
The
later
two
found
dogs
by one
heard
of the
Jiang
13
Hai's
men.
words and looked at each other.
Originally, after a few years of recuperation, they would
Chapter
come out to work like the
147.
others. Perhaps with their
However,
IQ, in order to
it
not
was
let her
difficult for
sister
them to
get
understand
hurt,
what family
Daliana
was.
learned
But
how
they
to
also
steal.
understood that there would
Every
be two
day,
more people to
she
please
stole
in the
some
future.
money to exchange for
Therefore,
food.
after wagging
Just
their
like that,
tails at
2
the two
years
girls,
passed. They lay down and played in the distance.
Chapter
As for Jiang
144.
Hai, because
there
the
are
two
indeed
girls
a lot of you,
upstairs, and I have
in
to
the
leave 2
future,
rooms
since
for
you're
the
going to
winemaker,
stay here,
you can only
come and take a
squeeze
look
in
at
for
your
the time
rooms.
being. This
Jiang
is my
Hai
room,
returned to his
the
manner
master
with the
bedroom.
girls.
Your
After
rooms
parking
are
the
next to
car,
mine. He took them
these
into the
4 guest
residential
bedrooms
area.
have all been renovated.
Of course, when they
You
walked
can go
in,
and choose
they
which one to
attracted
use
the
as your
attention
room.
of the people in the manor.
As they walked to the
After
second
all,
floor,
they were
Jiang
young and
Hai
beautiful.
introduced them.
It would be
When they
strange
reached
if
the
the men
second
did
floor,
not look at them.
Jiang Hai
The
saw that the
fisherman
door
and
of his
Philemon
room
was
was
open.
open.
Since they
Needless
had
to say,
families, this was
if
the
they looked at them
masterpiece
too
of Dai
much,
Teeth.
they would be punished.
Usually, Jiang Hai
Robbins,
and his 4
Burke
pets
Dollar,
always
and
lived together,
Edward Anderson
and
were
only
old,
Dai Teeth
so they
knew
just
how
looked
to
at
open the
them.
door.
However,
Since Dai
Belle
Teeth
and
learned this
Harriman
skill,
were somewhat
the
stunned.
2 dogs didn't
Even
need
when the
Jiang
girls
Hai
got
to
off the
open the
car,
door for them to
the
go
two
to the
of them
toilet
took the
every
initiative
morning.
to help the girls carry the toiletries
do you
that
think
Jiang
Xiao
Hai
Bai
bought
would be
for
so
them.
kind to let
This
Dai
action
Teeth sit on her
startled the
head?
girls.
But a
They were
single
still
man's
very
room,
vigilant towards
even
others,
if the 4 pets
so
were
they
more
didn't want
obedient
Harriman
and there
and
was
Belle
no
to
strange
touch
smell
their
in the room,
things.
they would
naturally
naturally
be a
be
lot of
themselves.
As
As
soon
Zhao
as they
Hai
went
nodded and
upstairs,
said,
they saw
"All
that on
right,
the big
all
bed,
right."
there was an
Harriman and
unfolded
Belle were
quilt,
very hurt
and the
by
curtains
this.
were not open.
Now,
The
the
only
only
person
person
had a
these
lot of
girls could
clothes,
trust was probably
socks,
Jiang Hai,
and even underwear
although
piled
Jiang
up.
Hai did not
Although
show it on
Jiang
his
Hai
face,
was not obsessed
he was
with
actually
cleanliness.
very happy.
It was inevitable
After
to change
driving away
underwear
Harriman
every
and
day.
Belle, who
A
wanted
man's
to flatter
underwear
him,
was easy to
Jiang
smell,
Hai took them to the
and
back
Jiang
of the
Hai
villa
was
area.
still a single man.
Then Jiang Hai
Cough,
arranged
cough.
for them
It
to
was a
live
bit
in
off
4
topic.
small villas in the
But as soon as
residential
they went
area.
upstairs,
There were
Jiang
16
Hai
blushed
blushed
because
because
his
his
room was
room
indeed
was
a
a bit too
residential
messy.
area. After
Which were
pretending
divided
to walk
into
over
3
and close the
rows.
door, the first
Jiang
row was
Hai
Jiang
pointed to the
Hai's
4
big
rooms
villa
next to the girls.
Then with Jiang
These were
Hai's
the 4
villa as the
guest
starting
rooms.
point,
But
now
now
they
they
were
were
going
5
to be the
small
2
villas in a
girls'
row.
rooms. The right
After
side was
Daliana and
directly
Marian
connected
looked
to
at
the
each other,
cowshed.
they pushed
In
open
the
the
doors
doors
of
of
the
each
rooms
small
next to them
villa and looked
there
inside.
was a space to ensure their
Jiang Hai
private
hadn't
world.
entered these 4
Then
rooms since
there
the
were 5
renovation,
villas in the
but
second row,
sometimes when he
and
asked the
6 villas in
housekeeper
the
to clean
third
up his
row.
room, they
Now,
would also
10
clean up the
rooms were
guest
occupied,
rooms.
so there was no
Robbins,
strange
Burke
smell
Dollar,
and dust in the room.
Philemon Turner,
When they pushed
Harriman
open the
Fels,
door,
and Belle
the
Lester,
2 girls' mouths
each of them
turned
lived
into
in
an
a
O
room
shape
in the
in
first
surprise.
row.
They
After
originally
all,
thought
they
that
were
the
the
place
ones
they
who
lived
chose
in would
the
be
rooms
similar to the
first.
place where
The
Aphrodite
fishermen
lived.
recruited by Jiang
But they were
Hai,
obviously
led
wrong.
by Edward
Jiang
Anderson,
Hai's guest
lived in
rooms
the
were
villas in the
completely
second row.
incomparable to the bedrooms
Jiang
of
Hai
small
arranged
villas.
2 villas for the new
spacious
girls,
room had a
who
big
lived
bed,
in the third row,
a separate bathroom,
originally,
and a small living
Jiang
room.
Hai didn't
The
need
room
so
had
many
already
people.
been set up with a
After
network
all,
cable,
if it was
a
replaced
variety
by
of
some normal
appliances,
men,
televisions,
just taking care of the
air
grapes,
conditioners,
planting
and
vegetables,
so on.
doing
This
odd
room
jobs,
was even a
and so
room to
on,
live here.
for people wouldn't be
The
enough.
decorations were
But
no
who
worse
told
than
him
a
to
hotel
pity these
suite.
girls?
In fact,
It's
it
not
was even
crowded.
better. It's not crowded. Thinking that
Thank
this
you.
would be their home in
After
the future,
hearing Jiang
the
Hai's
2 girls
arrangement,
didn't dare to step
Aphrodite
in.
and the others,
What?
who were
Not
originally standing
satisfied?
behind Jiang Hai,
If there's anything you're not
immediately
satisfied
gestured.
with, just say
These
it.
villas all
I'll
had
write it
more
down,
than 2 rooms,
and then I'll ask you to renovate
not to mention individual
but before that,
rooms.
you have to live
Even
here.
one room was excellent.
Seeing the 2 girls
They
hesitating,
had been looking at Jiang Hai's villas
said
just
with a
now.
smile.
No,
To be
I'm
honest,
very
satisfied.
Jiang
That's
Hai's
great.
villas were not worse
Hearing
than the
Jiang
villas in the
Hai's
suburbs
words,
where the rich
the
lived
two
in the
girls
Boston area.
also gestured one
Even if
after
they were
another.
not as rich as the
Looking
rich,
at the movements
it
of
would
the
not
two
be a
girls,
problem for them to be
Jiang
comparable
Hai
to
smiled,
ordinary white-collar
although
workers.
he didn't know why.
Because when
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai
felt
was
that if the two
decorating
girls
these
could
small
speak,
villas,
their
he bought
voices should
all
be
the
very
things that he
pleasant to
needed to
hear.
buy.
Suddenly,
The house had lights,
he remembered
beds,
something.
wardrobes,
He didn't know if his blood would
geothermal
be
heat,
useful.
electrical
Just as
appliances,
Jiang Hai
and
was
so
pondering,
on.
the two
Although
girls
it
had
could not
walked
be
into the
compared
room
to Jiang
quietly,
Hai's main
looking
villa,
around,
it was
touching
still
here and
very
there,
luxurious
for fear
and
of breaking
comfortable.
anything.
Jiang
If
Hai
they
had
hadn't
already told
accidentally
them to
turned
turn on the
TV,
geothermal heat
Jiang
in
Hai
advance.
might still be thinking.
Therefore,
When the
seeing
girls
the two
entered
girls
the small
satisfied
villa,
with the room,
the temperature had
Jiang
already
Hai
reached
also
26
walked in.
degrees Celsius.
The other three guest rooms
It was a
are
very
similar to
comfortable
this
temperature.
You
At
can
least in the
choose
eyes
one.
of these girls.
Who will live here
You
and
don't
who
have
will
to be
live in
too
the other
polite
rooms.
with me.
After
Looking
all,
at the two girls,
you have to work
Jiang
here.
Hai said with a smile.
If you have any problems
but when
in
they
the
heard
future,
Jiang Hai's words,
you can come to
the
my
two
main
girls
villa
shook
to
their
find me
heads.
at any time.
They had never been
if you
separated
encounter
since
any
they were
danger,
young.
There's a phone in the house.
They were not going to live
If it's
separately.
not convenient for you,
Looking at their decision,
just press the button.
Jiang Hai
Remember
persuaded
to lock
them.
the door.
Seeing that they
Although
were
the
really
people
not
in
just
my
being
manor should
polite,
be good people,
Jiang Hai
you
didn't
must
care.
be vigilant.
After giving them
Looking
the key
at the
to the
nervous
room and
girls in
helping
front
them
of
get
him,
the quilt to cover
Jiang
them at
Hai
night,
smiled and said,
Jiang Hai left.
then continued to
Returning
introduce
to
them
his
to each
room,
other.
Jiang
By
Hai
the way,
stood in
can
front of
you
the window
cook?
and looked at the
Don't
dark
starve
sky
yourselves.
outside. After
He
thinking
couldn't
for a
help
while,
but pat his
Jiang
face.
Hai suddenly
Really?
asked the girls,
How can I be
their
inexplicably
identities were indeed a
soft-hearted?
little special.
Muttering
It
in a
might
low
not be
voice,
good for them to
Jiang
eat in
Hai
other
didn't
people's
intend to
houses.
take care of these people.
After all,
But why did
they
he
were
suddenly
different
fall
from him.
ill?
And
In
he
the
did
end,
not have a
not only
professional
did he
cook
recruit
here.
8 women
If
as
they
workers,
did not know how to
but
cook,
he also adopted
it would be
2
troublesome.
godchildren.
No
He
need,
even had
we all
2
know how to
goddaughters.
cook. How
Here
could
in
it be
Jiang
so
Hai's
easy to get a
words,
goddaughter?
Aphrodite
Now that he
gestured.
thought about it,
After all,
he felt
they
a
used
headache.
to live in the orphanage.
He was still a
and the
child
children
who
in the
hadn't grown
orphanage,
up.
except for the very young ones,
Well, in fact,
would be arranged
he
to do
thought
some
that he
work when
hadn't
they grew a
grown up.
little older.
But in any
For
case,
example,
since
it was
Jiang
very
Hai
normal
said that
for
he would
them to
adopt
help
them
in the kitchen.
Jiang Hai would not
Therefore,
go
their
back on his
cooking
words.
skills were different.
Although he wouldn't
However,
go back
they
on
would
his
not
words.
starve to death.
At least he wouldn't
Seeing that they
easily
all
go
knew
back
how to
on his
cook,
words. Jiang Hai was
don't
relieved.
think about it.
Then,
Since
he
I
brought
have
these girls
decided
to his
that's
house.
it.
Here,
But there are still
Jiang
2
Hai
questions.
introduced the pets
Hasn't
that the girls
Qili
gave him.
signed yet?
In fact,
What does she
they
want
were
to
mainly
do?
little white
Also,
and little yellow.
think about it.
This was
When
to
will I
prevent
go
the
back
2
in
from
February?
accidentally injuring
Fu
them.
Yuan said that
When
he
the
will
girls
come
saw
over
the 2
during the
pets,
Chinese New
they were
Year.
very scared.
I will come back with
Especially
him
Delina
then.
and Marion.
Touching the stubble
They
that
had
had just
dealt with
grown on
these
his
dogs
chin.
a lot in the past.
Jiang Hai whispered
After
in
all,
Chinese.
where they lived,
He really
there were
didn't
a lot of
expect
stray dogs.
Qili's reaction.
And these stray
He
dogs were a
originally
threat
thought
to
that
these people
Qili
for a
would
long
also
time.
want to get rid of him as soon
However,
as possible.
these 2 dogs were different from those
After all,
ferocious
he
dogs
knew
that would
that
bare their
Qili had a
teeth when they saw
boyfriend.
them.
They were very
Ex-boyfriend.
obedient.
Although that guy
When
was
Jiang
quite
Hai
bad.
was talking,
But women,
they just sat there
emotions
obediently
would
and
always
looked at the
prevail
girls in
over
front of them
reason.
with their big eyes.
What's more, after
She was
Jiang
about to
Hai's
marry
voice
that man
fell,
at one time.
they sniffed the girls and then
Moreover,
left.
She was a woman.
After
It
the
was
2
useless
dogs
for her
left,
to keep such
the
a big
girls couldn't
family
help
business.
but breathe a sigh of relief.
She would get married and
Although
have
they
children
didn't know
sooner
why,
or later.
the 2 dogs
Maybe
gave them
in a
too
few
much
years,
pressure.
she would get
Seeing the
involved
girls
with that man
relaxed,
again.
Jiang
The
Hai
reason
didn't
why
say
Jiang
much.
Hai thought
This
so
was
was
also
not
a
without
test,
reason.
a show of
After
strength.
all, he was
But now,
Qili's legal
it seems
husband.
that the effect
but
was
the 2
good.
had been married for
Then,
more than a year.
Jiang Hai
Not
brought
to
them to
mention
the
doing
warehouse.
other things.
When
They
Jiang
didn't even
Hai
see
opened
each
the
other more than
warehouse,
one
the
hand.
girls were shocked.
At first,
in
he was
Jiang
jealous
Hai's
and
cold
annoyed.
storage,
He
there
would
was a
also
lot of
call
meat hanging.
Qili to fight for
These
something.
were the meat that
But
Luo
later
Binxi
he
and the
understood.
others wanted to eat
In
because their
Qili's
consumption
heart,
was really
there
high.
was no him at all.
Especially after
The
the
2 were
5
not
fishermen
people living
joined.
in the same world
So
at all.
every time they killed a
Perhaps
cow,
the intersection of
Luo
worlds would
Binxi
create
and the
some
others would give the
intersection
best beef to
but
Jiang
as far as he
Hai.
was concerned,
The rest of the
those
beef would be
intersection
put in the
points were
cold
just
storage.
illusions.
Whoever
Therefore,
needs to eat
Jiang
it can
Hai
come and
didn't
get
care
it.
about what
It's
Qili thought in
convenient.
her heart.
Jiang Hai's
long
house
time
had 3
ago,
cold
he
storage.
wanted to end
one
this
for
wrong
frozen
marriage
meat,
and start
one
over.
for frozen fish,
Finally, he was
shrimp,
successful
and
now.
crabs,
And
he
was
was
now
now
a rich
vegetables.
man. And his
Of
life
course,
had nothing to do
Jiang
with
Hai
Qili.
also had a small
If it wasn't
warehouse
because
in
of
his
this
villa,
incident,
which was used
he
to
might
store
have
the good
forgotten
things he
about
liked
this
to
woman.
eat. In
Knock,
front of the
knock,
surprised
knock.
eyes of these girls,
Just as Jiang Hai was thinking
opened
about
the 3
something,
warehouses.
a series of knocks
Seeing
sounded
this,
from the
the
door.
girls' eyes
Then,
widened even
Jiang
more.
Hai looked back
As long
and
as
found
you
that
don't waste
Deliana
anything,
had already
you
arrived
can
in front
eat
of
as much
Jiang
as you
Hai's
want.
room.
As
Because
long as you can
Jiang
eat
Hai's
it,
villa was
you can take it
geothermal
back to
24
eat.
hours a
You
day.
can choose to come
So
and
it was
take some
very
every
warm
day,
here.
or
So
take more
Deliana
back.
didn't wear anything
The place
at this
where you
time.
live also has
Her
a
slender
refrigerator,
body was wrapped
but
in a
the
bath
frozen
towel,
food is not
and her
very
hair
delicious.
was still a little wet. Looking at the
It looked
performance
like she
of the
had
girls,
just washed her hair.
Jiang Hai
Her
smiled.
small feet stepped
The
on Jiang
expressions of
Hai's
these girls
carpet.
made him very
At this time,
satisfied.
she was standing
Hearing
at the
Jiang
door,
Hai's words,
looking at
the
Jiang
girls
Hai
also
timidly.
calmed down.
What's
Before
the
coming
matter?
here,
Why
they
did
had
you come
already
here?
arranged who would live
Looking
with
at the
whom
girl in
according
front
to
of
their
him,
close relationship.
Jiang Hai's eyes
At this
flashed with a
time,
trace of
they
panic.
also sent
But he still
representatives
slowed
of
down
each
his
family
voice and
and walked
asked
into the cold
Hearing
storage.
Jiang Hai's words,
Compared to vegetables
Deliana
and
hesitated
seafood,
for a moment
they now
and
prefer
took off
to
the bath
eat meat.
towel wrapped around her
After
body.
all,
The
the
Boston
scenery that
area
Jiang
is
Hai
Hai
to the
saw
sea.
last night appeared in
fishing
front of him
here is
again.
abundant all year
Jiang
round,
Hai also
and the price
understood
of
her
seafood
meaning
is
from
not
her
high.
eyes.
As for
She was
vegetables, although the
sacrificing
vegetables in the
herself.
United States are also very
Seeing this,
expensive,
Jiang
the people
Hai's
in the
face
United States
instantly
don't eat
turned
this kind of
ugly.
thing.
He
Compared
sighed and
to other
walked in front of
foods,
Deliana.
they prefer beef.
Seeing Jiang
At
Hai
most,
walking over,
after taking a lot of
Deliana's
beef,
breathing
they
became
take some
heavier.
vegetables to
She
season it.
subconsciously wanted to
Jiang
step
Hai
back,
watched them take
but
all
she
the
stopped
food
and
and
slowly
sent them back to
closed
the
her
room where they
eyes.
lived.
She wasn't
It's
an
still
ordinary
winter in the
girl
next
who
2
stayed at
months,
home all the
so
time.
there's no way to grow
She had
grapes
seen
or
too many
vegetables.
men and women.
You should
So
take
she
care of your
vaguely knew
bodies
what a man
first.
would do after
You
seeing
are
such
too
a girl.
thin now.
She did
I want
this
to
because
raise
she
some
wanted to
laborers,
exchange her
not
body for a
models.
stable and warm
Wait
home.
until March,
She didn't
when the
regret it
harvest
at
will
all.
start.
When Jiang Hai
But
left,
unfortunately,
the girls breathed
Jiang
a
Hai
sigh
was
of
not
relief.
as bad as she had
Then,
imagined.
a
Nor
happy
as
smile
despicable
appeared
as she
on
had
their
imagined.
faces again.
After
Although
walking
they
in
had
front of
imagined what
Deliana,
kind of place
Jiang
Jiang
Hai
Hai's place
admitted
would
that
be,
this girl was
they didn't
indeed a
expect
beauty.
it.
She
But they
had
really
big
didn't
eyes,
think that
long
Jiang Hai's
eyelashes,
place would be
and
so
golden
good.
hair.
Because it needed to be cut very short, comfortable, spacious villa to live in, and was naturally buttoned inwards. Shrimp, her face alone was enough to cause the downfall of a country, and even their own private according to Zhang Hai's weekly salary, she could be rated 80 points. They didn't have to worry about anything. However, they didn't have to starve. Wanted to have a daughter, compared to where they used to live, so he just bent down. After Zhang Hai left and wrapped it around her body, the girls began to get busy. Daliana, they checked their Zhang Hai's words and feeling the bath towel wrapped around her body. Even the water meter, Daliana opened her eyes again. And electricity meter. Remember, I carefully looked at it for a long time before they started to cook, or my guilt. Although the cooking wasn't delicious here. For them, of course, it was the best delicacy. You can also treat me as your friend. They were full for the first time in many years. We only need to communicate with each other through our minds. Many of them fell asleep as soon as they touched the pillow. Even though the sun hadn't completely set at this time. As for the leader chosen by the girls, stared at the blue eyes in front of her. Arnold didn't fall asleep. Zhang Hai's words entered the girl's ears. She lay on the bed, blinking her big eyes and looking at the white ceiling above her. At this moment, the girl was stubborn even when she was caught and was about to be beaten. This man had rescued her from that dark world. But after hearing Zhang Hai's words towards Zhang Hai, her tear ducts unconsciously developed. Her heart was filled with gratitude. Big drops of tears rolled down from her eyes and fell on Zhang Hai's carpet. At this moment, looking at Zhang Hai's serious face, didn't know about this. Daliana nodded seriously settling the and then threw herself into Zhang Hai's arms, returned to the villa, touching the girl's hair in front of him. Looking at the two girls in front of him who had yet to find a way out. Zhang Hai couldn't help but smack his teeth. I hope the people from the Welfare Institute will be able to persuade them. Chapter 148. What happened that night was just a small episode in Zhang Hai's life. When he woke up the next day, he felt that he had to adapt to his new life. When he got up, the two little ones were still asleep, so he decided to do some morning exercises before coming back to cook for them. In the end, when he returned, he found that the two little ones had woken up at some point in time. Not only did they tidy up the room, cook, and even wash the clothes. In fact, the most important thing was Zhang Hai's clothes, socks and underwear. Looking at the underwear hanging in the bathroom on the first floor, Zhang Hai's face couldn't help but twitch. He felt a little embarrassed. However, he still accepted the girls' kindness. Perhaps in their eyes, they were troubling Zhang Hai here because they had to do something for Zhang Hai. It was not bad to deal with some housework. After breakfast, Zhang Hai took the two little ones and the 8 girls to the town of Winthrop. He gave the 8 girls a month's salary in advance. After all, they also needed to buy things. Zhang Hai wanted them to be independent, and they were very willing to do so. At the same time, when they learned that the two little ones had become Zhang Hai's daughters, they were also very surprised and envious. After all, they were still workers, but their daughters were different. After shopping in Winthrop for a day, each of them bought at least 3 sets of clothes to change into. Including the one given by Zhang Hai, they had bought 4 sets of clothes, including underwear. Although Zhang Hai didn't know much about underwear, these women more or less knew a thing or two. In addition to clothes, they also bought toothbrushes, toothpaste, towels, and so on. Naturally, Delina and Marion did the same. These girls might have laughed the most in the past few years, and it was also the most comfortable day for them. They shopped for a whole day. In the evening, Zhang Hai invited them to have dinner in the Italian restaurant in Winthrop before taking them back to the manor. Compared to these girls, Delina and Marion gained more things today. Not only did they have new clothes, new pajamas, and toiletries, but Zhang Hai also bought them 2 computers. Girls were different from boys. If Zhang Hai bought a computer or a laptop, it would definitely be an alien, or a Thor or a human from the future, who would use a laptop as a top PC. However, Delina and Marion didn't know how to choose these things. In the end, they chose 2 3-star computers. Well, in terms of beauty, Samsung and Apple were still the best. However, Apple's computers were not ultra-thin, while Samsung's computers were not. After buying all the things, Zhang Hai and the others completed their task for the day. The next day, Zhang Hai continued to go out to sea. After all, he still had work to do. When he went out to sea, naturally, he was teased by the old fisherman for a long time. But Zhang Hai also gave them a warning. These girls were his employees, so these people shouldn't have any thoughts that they shouldn't have. When they heard Zhang Hai's words, these people's faces became sullen. Obviously, Zhang Hai was not the only one who had such thoughts. Their wives also had the same thoughts. Except for Edward Anderson, in these days, when these men went to the toilet for a long time at night, their wives would knock on the door to make sure that they were inside. Hearing this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile. It seemed that getting married too early was not a good thing. Although these people had bad luck at home, they were still very lucky outside, especially in the fishery. Also, after Zhang Hai used Big Dumb to drive away the fish, their catch was rapidly increasing. For 5 consecutive days, Zhang Hai and the others went out to sea, and the fish they caught in these 5 days were sold for more than $600,000. This was not including the food that Zhang Hai kept for himself. Naturally, in these days, Zhang Hai also gave out a lot of bonuses. Almost everyone received more than $10,000 in bonuses. They were very happy with this generous boss and worked more seriously. On the 4th day, Moses Adams came to Zhang Hai and gave Zhang Hai the certificate of adoption of the 2 girls. In fact, Zhang Hai was 27 years old. At least, he was still single in the United States. Whether he was married or not, it was impossible for him to adopt 2 14-year-old girls. However, there was a saying that money could make the devil push the millstone. When money and connections reached a certain level, even the millstone could make the devil push the devil, let alone the devil. Zhang Hai was in such a state at the moment. He had spent $200,000 on the adoption certificate. Once the $200,000 were thrown in, the welfare agencies that had been insistent decided to turn a blind eye to it. Who said that overseas was absolutely clean? If you paid them to commit fraud and break the law, they might not do it. But if it was just for them to turn a blind eye, they would be more than happy to do so. Just like that, Delina Iveline and Marion Iveline officially became Zhang Hai's daughters. Then Zhang Hai called Xueqi Clive and invited her to the manor for dinner. He also told her about sending the 2 girls to school. However, Xueqi Clive was in a bit of a dilemma, although she agreed with Zhang Hai's approach. The problem was that there was no school for the deaf in Winthrop. Although there was one in Boston, it was too far away and they had to live in the school. Now the 2 girls were extremely dependent on Zhang Hai, and were unwilling to leave Zhang Hai to live in the school. If they went to an ordinary school, they would easily be discriminated against and bullied. This was also something that Zhang Hai could not control. Most importantly, they had lived in the Welfare Institute since they were young. Although the 2 girls also studied there, the basic volunteers were only there for basic education. However, the volunteers at the Welfare Institute only taught them the most basic things. They were only at the level of a 3rd or 4th grader. The only difference was that they could recognize all the words. Under such circumstances, if they were to go to secondary school, they wouldn't be able to catch up. If they went to primary school, not to mention them, even Zhang Hai felt a little ashamed. So after thinking about it, the only way might be to find a tutor to teach them first. Fortunately, the learning atmosphere in the United States was extremely free. Even if they were self-taught at home, they could still take part in some school exams and get a review or something like that. It was just that they would not be given a normal grade. Zhang Hai was also relieved about this. After learning that Zhang Hai was going to hire a tutor, Xueqi Clive volunteered and said that she could come over on Saturday and Sunday to tutor the 2 sisters. Zhang Hai was also very grateful. But the 2 sisters were not very interested in Xueqi Clive, especially when they saw that she seemed to be quite close to Zhang Hai. However, in any case, the problem of the 2 sisters going to school was finally solved. Zhang Hai can now concentrate on fishing in his own fishing ground. Because the fish in the coral reef are not moving, he can only catch the fish in the sand, and with the help of Dasha, he can drive them away. The progress was quite fast. According to Edward Anderson's research and estimation, the total value of all the fish in Zhang Hai's fish farm was about $8 million. The fish in the coral reefs accounted for about 60% of the total value. Because Zhang Hai was not willing to destroy the coral reefs, the 60% was not touched, which meant that 8 million of the 8 million were not touched. Of the remaining 2 million, about 5 million were seabed fish, which were sea cucumbers, sea urchins, crabs, lobsters, and the like. Although Zhang Hai would catch some every time he went out to sea, he did not catch too many. Therefore, these things were basically left over. Only 7 million of the fish needed to be caught, but they still needed to maintain the ecological balance. Leaving 20% meant that he needed to catch about 4 million fish. These fish needed to be caught because they would not be eaten up by these fish when they were harvesting the seeds of the wine seaweed. In the blink of an eye, it was already late January. Zhang Hai's income from pure fish sales had reached his initial expectations. There were even some unexpected gains, such as the blue marlin caught at the beginning. Although such good things did not happen again, Zhang Hai's fish were the best in the sea area. Of course, There were also many people eyeing Jiang Hai's fish farm. Some people even said that they wanted to buy Jiang Hai's fish farm. Jiang Hai was very generous. He would pay them 1.5 billion in cash in one lump sum, and the fish farm and manor would be given to them. Then, there was no then. In other people's eyes, Jiang Hai must be crazy. You bought it for 280 million a few months ago, and now you want to sell it for 1.5 billion a few months later. Who would be crazy enough to buy it? In this regard, Jiang Hai could only shrug, because even if he said that his 20,000 cows were worth 1 billion, no one would believe him. In this way, time slowly passed, and it was finally time to scatter the seaweed seeds. Early this morning, Jiang Hai was woken up by the doorbell. When he went over to take a look, he saw that it was also an acquaintance. The black man who sold his fish seedlings, Porter Aniva. In addition to him, there was also a white man. Jiang Hai also knew this white man. It was the boss who sold seaweed and seaweed seeds that Porter Aniva met. "Hey, you guys came early enough." After opening the door to let the car of the two people in, Jiang Hai also changed his clothes, walked out of the house with a glass of milk, and looked at the two who were chatting with Ai Dehua and others who got up early in the parking lot. "This is business. Of course, we have to be early. We can't let the customers wait for us, right?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Iron Bull Porter Aniva, who had a good temper with him, revealed his big white teeth and laughed heartily. "Well man, you're right. No wonder your business is getting bigger and bigger. But man, I only see you guys. Where are my seeds?" Shrugging, Jiang Hai said non-committally. "This kind of attitude is really good for business. Mr. Jiang Hai, you didn't build an airport here, so I put the seeds in Winthrop. When you are ready, you can fly over at any time to scatter them." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the white man here also said with a smile. Chapter 149. Using a plane to scatter seeds of seaweed and seaweed was not as easy as one would imagine. In fact, this was a rather troublesome matter. First, Edward would go with them to see if there were any problems with this batch of seaweed seeds. Then, the others would sail over and throw down some kind of smoke bomb at the place where the seeds needed to be scattered. This kind of smoke bomb was very common. Its most common use was to float on the sea and emit thick smoke. Generally, planes would have this kind of thing so that if the plane was forced to land in the sea, the people who escaped from the plane could use this thing to locate them. But now, Jiang Hai and the others used this thing to mark the location of the wine seaweed seeds. If this thing was scattered too far away, it would not be in Jiang Hai's territory. If it was scattered too close, it would be scattered on the coral reef. Then, it would be good if 1 in 10 of these seaweed seeds could germinate and become a delicacy for the fish there. Therefore, the selection of the location was also very particular. Fortunately, the fishermen hired by Jiang Hai were all old fishermen. These days, while they were fishing, they also checked the distribution of fish below the sea area. They were still very considerate about the location of the seaweed seeds. After exchanging a few words with Jiang Hai, everyone set off. Edward followed them to the airport in Winthrop. As for Tommy Charles, Enoch Cece, Andrew Christian, and Marin Rupert, they all drove Jiang Hai's motorboats and went into the sea with smoke bombs. As for Jiang Hai, since he had nothing to do, he was also going to take a look. "You haven't been to the sea with me yet. Do you want to go and take a look?" Jiang Hai glanced at Daliana and Marian behind him, who were still confused about the situation, and asked them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls nodded happily. "Hey Marin, wait for us, let's go and take a look." Since the two girls were willing to go, Jiang Hai was not polite and directly said to Marin Rupert, who had not left yet, "Then you should wear more clothes, boss. At least give them more clothes." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marin Rupert, who usually doesn't like to talk, pointed to their clothes and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai immediately took the two girls upstairs to change into thicker clothes that could block the wind. After all, it was the coldest time of the year. It didn't matter if he was in good health, but the two sisters were not in good health. These days, they had been nourished by delicious food every day. In addition, there were a lot of fitness equipment in Jiang Hai's room. As a result, the two girls' bodies were no longer just skin and bones like when they first met. They now had some fat and muscles. But even so, it was impossible for them to withstand the cold wind outside. After Jiang Hai specially armed them, the three of them left the villa and drove a modified all-terrain vehicle in the direction of the dock. When they arrived, Tommy and the others were almost ready. In the beginning, Jiang Hai bought a total of 3 boats and a fishing boat. Now it was just right for these 4 people to drive. Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian. These 3 people drove the boat and were almost ready. When Jiang Hai arrived, they were ready to set off. After greeting Jiang Hai, they drove the boat, broke through the layers of waves, and headed into the distance. As for Jiang Hai, he took the 2 girls and stepped on the fishing boat driven by Marin Rupert. "Boss, just sit in the cabin. When we arrive, we can go and look at the plate armor." After boarding the boat, Marin Rupert said to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also agreed. He didn't have the leisure to go and look at the plate armor now. The wind outside was very cold. Instead of freezing outside, it was better to stay in the cabin and drink some drinks. However, compared to Jiang Hai, who had been to the sea many times, Delina and Marian were more interested in the outside world. After these days of getting along, Jiang Hai also had some grasp of the characters of these 2 girls. Although these 2 girls were twins, they looked almost the same, and their tastes were almost the same. They bought clothes of the same size. When they bought 2 pieces, at least when they wore the same clothes, Jiang Hai couldn't tell them apart. So the only way for Jiang Hai to distinguish them was their hair. Because Delina wanted to be a thief, her hair was cut very short. She pretended to be a boy so that she wouldn't attract attention. As for Marian, she still had long hair. This was the only difference between the 2. But thinking about the future, if the 2 girls had the same hair length, it would be troublesome. However, although they looked the same and liked almost the same things, their characters were very different. Delina's character was more boorish. She was more curious about new things. She wanted to try everything that she hadn't tried before. She was also more courageous. After getting along with Xiao Bai and Little Yellow, she was now able to play well with them. At least, she wasn't afraid of them anymore. Marian was a very well-behaved girl. She was very timid, but she was very careful. She had a very stable resting time. Almost every day, she would clean up the house. She was also good at cooking. Compared to the energetic Delina, she was much quieter. She was still afraid of Jiang Hai's pets, but at least she had the courage to feed them. At this time, Jiang Hai was basically a shopkeeper who didn't do anything. He didn't even feed the pets because Marian would feed them. From now on, it could be seen that the characters of the 2 girls were different. Since boarding the boat, Delina hadn't been obedient. She had been looking outside the boat excitedly, looking forward to seeing something. Although Marian was also very curious and excited, she sat obediently beside Jiang Hai. She only looked up at the opposite window from time to time. After Marin Rupert called out, the fishing boat slowly moved towards the nearest point. Jiang Hai's fishing ground wasn't small, but it wasn't particularly large either. After sailing for about half an hour, the boat had already sailed out of the coral reef and entered the nearest place where Jiang Hai scattered grass seeds. After arriving here, the fishing boat slowly slowed down. "Boss, we're here." Following Marin Rupert's words, Jiang Hai also took out a box of smoke bombs from the cabin and walked out of the cabin with the 2 girls who had been looking forward to playing on the deck. As soon as they walked out of the cabin, the cold wind that was like an ice blade passed in front of Jiang Hai. It almost instantly went through the gaps in his clothes, making him shiver involuntarily. The Northern Hemisphere in January was indeed the most unbearable time. It should be the coldest time now. It will be much better in February. Seeing Jiang Hai shiver, Marin Rupert, who was beside him, also said with a smile. As for the 2 girls, although they were also shivering from the cold, they still opened their eyes curiously and looked outside. The original shore of the endless sea had turned into a thin line at this time. They could vaguely see the woods and buildings on the other side, but they couldn't see the specific details clearly. This was the first time the 2 girls came to the sea. As soon as they got on the deck, they looked around curiously. Pay attention to safety. Don't get too close to the railing. If you fall, it will be troublesome. After shouting at the 2 girls, Jiang Hai helped Marin Rupert open the box in front of him. Compared to the 2 girls, Jiang Hai, who had been to the sea several times, and Marin, who had been dealing with the sea most of his life, the sea was actually not that fun. After all, the sea was different from the land. The land had all kinds of sceneries, but the sea was the same everywhere. It was very novel at first, but after the novelty, it became boring. After opening the box, Jiang Hai and Marin took out some smoke grenades from inside. After opening them, they threw them directly into the sea. The smoke would float on the sea for about 3 hours. After 3 hours, the smoke grenades would lose their effect. Although this also created some marine garbage, this garbage would be carried by the ocean currents to Jiang Hai's beach. At that time, Jiang Hai and the others would naturally clean it up. After throwing 5 or 6 smoke grenades here, Marin got off the boat again and went to the next location. About an hour later, the location was completed. If Jiang Hai was sitting in a plane at this time and looked down from above, he would find that the sky above his fishing ground had been drawn in a regular circle by colorful smoke. This was the place where the wine grass seeds were needed. About 10 minutes later, a roar slowly passed from a distance. Then, a small plane entered Jiang Hai's sight. After the plane's lower cabin door opened, bags of unwrapped grass seeds fell from the cabin into the sea below. So this is how the grass seeds are scattered. I thought it was some kind of high-tech. Looking at the other party throwing the grass seeds directly into the sea, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. Originally, he thought that planting seaweed might be like planting rice, which would be very troublesome. But obviously, the word troublesome doesn't exist in the dictionary of the Americans. The Americans, to be exact, are Westerners. They worship the law of nature, which is the survival of the fittest. Whether it's raising or planting things, they don't care too much about them. Except for some extremely luxurious things, they just create the best and most suitable living conditions and then raise them freely. Just like children, most of the children in the United States will not be spoiled like in China. Instead, they will cultivate their independence from an early age. Of course, this is not absolute. There will be people who will spoil and cultivate them. This is a matter of proportion. Chapter 150. The plane above his head left after 3 rounds, and Marlon Rupert returned to the cabin, preparing to return. That's it. Seeing that Marlon had gone down, Jiang Hai also walked into the cabin with Daliana and Marion, who were still unsatisfied. Suddenly, he felt that his money seemed to have been spent in vain. He could have just thrown it away casually. He had spent real money to buy those seaweed seeds. How could they just throw them away like that? Can they guarantee that they will grow? Of course, that's it. These seaweed seeds were carefully cultivated by them. Before they scattered them, they must have tested the water quality here and watched the weather forecast. They must have confirmed that there will be no southward currents or blizzards recently. As long as these seaweed seeds can safely fall on the sand at the bottom, there is a 70% chance that they will grow into seaweed. Marlon Rupert laughed when he heard Jiang Hai's amateurish words. The sea was not land. You could plant things one by one, as long as you didn't find it troublesome. There was water pressure in the sea. The deepest place in Jiang Hai's sea area was a few hundred meters deep. Humans definitely couldn't go down. It was also impossible for machines to do so. Otherwise, the seaweed seeds wouldn't be so cheap. Although Jiang Hai understood that Marlon was telling the truth, he still curled his lips. This was the mindset of a small farmer, and he couldn't change it in a short time. I can bear with it if some of the seaweed seeds are washed away. What if the fish run away when I raise them? He thought for a while. The seaweed seeds were indeed cheap, but the fry were expensive. He had spent so much money to buy the fry, so he had to inquire about it. There are 2 ways. One is to build a net around it, but I don't recommend it because it will be very troublesome for our fishing boats to go out. The net and propeller will easily be entangled with these things. Secondly, I also heard that Boss bought the fry. The fry are very small at the beginning, so if we build a seine, we need to make the mesh very small. But if the mesh is very small, not only will it block the fry's way out, but it will also block the microorganisms, shrimp, fish, and so on brought in by the ocean currents. The most important thing is actually the microorganisms. In this case, Boss, the coral reef you left behind may starve to death in a few years. Once the coral reef dies, the ecological balance here will be destroyed, and even the water quality will become very bad. When Marlon heard Jiang Hai's words, he thought about what Jiang Hai said and understood what Jiang Hai was thinking. Indeed, Jiang Hai was thinking about whether he should use something to block this place, but now listening to Marlon, Jiang Hai also sighed. It seems that his thinking is still too simple. What's the second idea? After hesitating, Jiang Hai asked him. That is to feed them. In addition to the early mullet, cuttlefish, shrimp, and so on, we regularly put some bait in the place where the fish go. This will attract the fish to stay in this area and not go out. It will even attract the fish outside. Now, most marine fisheries do this. Marlin explained after hearing Zhang Hai's words. But if we feed them, it will be very troublesome. Hearing Marlin's words, Zhang Hai thought about it in his heart. Indeed, it is more suitable to use food to keep these fish here than to build a net cage, and the most important thing is, what is Zhang Hai's first goal here? To upgrade the Dragon Balls in his body. If he really destroys the environment of the fishery, it is estimated that he will be dreaming if he wants to grow 8 scales in a day. It's quite troublesome. Right now, we only have fishing boats in our fishery. It's wrong to use these fishing boats to fish, but if we use them to feed, we might be able to go out in the morning and come back the next morning. Marlin said to Zhang Hai after thinking for a while. He heard from Edward Anderson that Zhang Hai has long wanted to buy a plane, and he came to him because he can fly a plane. However, Zhang Hai has not made up his mind recently, but now it seems that he has to make up his mind. Buying a plane is very expensive. Compared with the fish in the fishery, Zhang Hai feels that a plane doesn't seem to be so distressing. After hesitating, Zhang Hai asked Marlin Rupert in front of him. It's okay, but it's not cheap. Generally speaking, a large manor like ours will be equipped with 2 planes, a helicopter and a normal agricultural plane. The fishery I used to work in used Poland's M18. Australia's GA200 is also not bad, and the top one is New Zealand's. But speaking of domestic aircraft, there is the air tractor. If you buy this in our country, you will get a discount. But recently, the Nong 5 in Huaxia is also not bad. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Marlin Rupert also said. Listening to his introduction, Zhang Hai's head is really big. These planes are really diverse. These planes, the cheap ones are $100,000, the expensive ones are about $300,000, I don't know the specifics. In the end, Marlin summarized and gave a price. Hearing this price, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. So cheap. Originally, Zhang Hai thought that a plane, no matter how agricultural it was, would be worth a few $1,000,000. After all, in his impression, planes have always been toys for the rich. At least, he didn't dare to think about it before. Thinking about some of the reports he read before, some rich artists bought planes that cost tens of millions or even hundreds of millions. Even if it was 20 million renminbi, it would only be more than $3 million. In his opinion, it was very expensive. This was also the reason why he always said he would buy it but didn't. But now that he heard Marlin Rupert's words, Zhang Hai was stunned. How could a plane be so cheap? In fact, Zhang Hai was confused about one thing. The kind of plane that Zhang Hai was thinking of was a passenger plane that flew everywhere. In addition to the cost of the plane, there was also the cost of the crew, the captain, the fuel, the money to stay at various airports, the money to apply for flight routes, and so on. It could be said that these were 2 completely different things. Agricultural planes were naturally not passenger planes. Its main structure was actually not much different from the planes in the early stages of World War II. First, it couldn't fly very fast. It was basically impossible to exceed 300 kilometers per hour. To put it bluntly, if a car drove faster, it might fly faster than it. Second, it couldn't fly very high. Basically, it could fly more than 1,000 meters. Third, agricultural planes naturally couldn't fly everywhere. Some large airports and the like didn't allow agricultural planes to be used. To put it bluntly, agricultural planes were used for farm work, not to go out and show off. That was all. In fact, the plane that Marlin was talking about was the kind that people drove, large agricultural planes. If it was some small drones, such as the small ones used in forests or planting areas, one could be bought for about $10,000, or even a few $1,000s. Compared to these agricultural planes, those were really big toys. Where can I buy these planes? Do I have to build a runway or something? Hearing Marlin Rupert's introduction, Zhang Hai was also a little tempted. If it was only a few $100,000 or a few $100,000, he really didn't care too much, so he immediately asked. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Marlin smiled. Boss, do you have a black card? Boss, don't you have a black gold card? You can make a phone call and American Express will do it for you. They can help you contact them for whatever you want to buy. As for the runway problem, it's also easy. Because it's a small agricultural plane, it's not heavy, So you can just build a flat cement road for a few hundred meters on the edge of the manor's pasture. Plus the warehouse to park the plane. It will cost more than $10,000. Based on his experience, Marin Rupert calculated and said to Zhang Hai. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai was also very tempted. When the boat returned to the dock, Zhang Hai first called American Express. Soon after, a seductive female voice prompted him. His phone received some company quotes and details of the planes. There were dozens of planes in total. Zhang Hai himself didn't know much about these things. He didn't understand at all. He could only understand how high the plane could fly, how heavy it was, and how much it weighed when it took off. After all, they were all planes. The weight of these planes was at least 1 ton. However, what interested Zhang Hai the most was the air tractor. Although this was the most expensive agricultural plane, because he was an investor in the United States, he bought this thing with a discount. Among the air tractor series, Zhang Hai was most interested in the AT-802. One of the reasons why Zhang Hai was interested in this kind of plane was that the plane itself was particularly big. With a weight of 3 tons, this guy was a giant among the agricultural tractors. Just like buying a car, Zhang Hai liked big things. The maximum takeoff weight was 6.5 tons, the maximum cruising speed was 280 kilometers per hour, and the maximum speed was 360 kilometers per hour. Although it wasn't particularly fast, it was still the fastest agricultural plane. The reason why Zhang Hai decided so quickly was mainly because of some other news. This kind of aircraft was not only an extremely powerful existence in terms of agricultural use, but it was also an extremely powerful existence in other aspects. Even in South America or some less developed countries, this kind of plane belonged to the series of fighter jets. Because of the high cruising speed and weight, it meant that the metal sheet was thick, the defense was good, and the carrying capacity was high. This meant that it could be modified into any shape you wanted. All kinds of weapons such as Gatling guns and rockets, as long as you wanted it, it could be installed. Even Huaxia had bought many of these planes. What did this mean? It meant that this thing was indeed a good thing. Although Zhang Hai didn't think of installing missiles on it, he was sure that this thing was not very expensive, so he didn't hesitate. Chapter 151. Hey boss, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to blow up Winthrop? Zhang Hai's intention to buy a plane was a big deal. After all, he had just arrived here and didn't know much about these things. Therefore, after deciding what to buy, he didn't directly pay for it. Instead, he planned to discuss it with his subordinates. After learning that Zhang Hai wanted to buy this Big Mac, not to mention others, Philip was the first to shout. Blow up my ass. Do you think I can blow up a small town in the United States just because I want to? Are you kidding me? Although Zhang Hai had the idea of modifying it, he wouldn't admit it in front of Philip and the others. Hey boss, the air tractor is good, but it consumes too much fuel. If you really don't want to blow up Winthrop, then there's no point in buying it. That's right. To be honest, boss, we just want to buy a plane to throw some bait or patrol the surrounding area. We don't need such a heavy plane. The price is enough to buy 5 dromedaries. I don't think it's necessary. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia and the head of the fishermen, Edouard Anderson, who had just returned, also said hesitantly. These two were people who dealt with the ocean and ranching all year round. In their eyes, spending money was fine, but every dollar should be spent on the blade. If Zhang Hai wanted to buy a private plane, they had no right to ask how much it would cost. However, if he wanted to buy a plane for the manor, it would be a little too expensive. Hey boss, I support you. When I was in the Triangle State, we also had this guy. This guy really has a lot of uses. After modification, it can be used directly on the battlefield. If it's not modified, it can also be used as a battlefield ambulance plane. If it's not hit by a rocket launcher, no matter how large a caliber gun hits it, it's impossible to penetrate its protective panel. At this time, Bell said with a smile. Although he said he supported Zhang Hai could tell that he didn't support Zhang Hai's decision. After all, this thing was too expensive. If they really didn't need to fight, then there was really no need to buy it. However, once Zhang Hai made a decision, he wouldn't be so easily persuaded. You have to be clear that what we need is a large agricultural plane. Our manor is this big now, and the fishing ground is this big. But I might need to expand it. I see a lot of empty land near us. Those are my targets. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. As for the expansion, he said, well, he was actually lying. He has invested so much money in this manner now, and he hasn't seen any results yet. How can he easily invest more money? Hee, boss, stop fooling around. If you buy a fishing ground, you'll be buying the high seas. The US government won't dare to sell it to you there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tommy Charles didn't believe it and said with a smile. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Indeed, the range of his fishing ground was about to reach the high seas. If he bought more, wouldn't he have to buy the high seas as well? Thinking of this, he also felt that his excuse was a little fake. Just as Jiang Hai fell into embarrassment, a voice slowly came from behind. Actually, I feel that there is no problem with the boss buying this plane. Looking at the voice, they saw Marlon Rupert standing not far behind Jiang Hai and talking leisurely. Because the boss's fish are very mixed, if these fish are placed in one place, they will easily kill each other. Fortunately, the boss's fishing ground is very big, so they can be placed in different places. But in this case, to feed them, they will have to go to many places. If it's a plane like a dromedary, there will be no way to continue to go to two places. But if it's an air tractor, then there is no need to worry about cruising at all. It can put all the fish in one place, which will save a lot of trouble. Hearing Marlon Rupert's words, everyone remembered this. The guy in front of them was not a master who played by the rules. When others bought fish, they tried to buy fish that could be raised together, but he was different. This guy bought a bunch of fish in the east and a bunch of fish in the west. Most importantly, many of the fish were predatory and couldn't be raised together. If that's the case, the air tractor is not bad. Hearing this, Edward Anderson also nodded. Hearing the fisherman's boss say so, the others couldn't say anything and could only agree. Hearing that everyone agreed, Jiang Hai immediately called the company's American Express service. The phone rang less than 3 times before it was picked up. It was the same sweet female voice who asked Jiang Hai in Chinese. Hello, Mr. Jiang, I am Maxie Williams. How may I help you? Although Jiang Hai's funds were slowly decreasing, at this time, the amount on his card was at least 8 figures. He was definitely a big customer of American Express, so the operator naturally didn't dare to be careless. Hearing the operator's voice, it was indeed sweet. At least 5 plus signs were needed, but Jiang Hai was already used to it. Hello, Miss Maxie. I'm Jiang Hai. I've decided to buy an air tractor, at 802. Where do I need to buy it? How much is it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Maxie continued to ask. Hello, sir. What model do you want? Model? I'm really not sure. Hearing Maxie's question, Jiang Hai was stunned. He didn't look carefully just now. It's like this. At 802 is a general name. There are many submodels under it, such as the Model A. This plane is mainly used for conversion into a private jet. The price is slightly more expensive and needs to be customized separately. The price of the Bear plane is $680,000 and needs to be shipped back from the headquarters in Texas. The Model U plane is an anti-riot plane. It can be equipped with many types of weapons, equipment, and so on. You can choose to customize and install it yourself, but you need to apply for a local license to install it. The price of the Bear plane is $710,000. The price of the other modified planes is uncertain. If you want to choose a plane for your manor, you can choose the Model F. This model is mainly used for forest firefighting and agricultural applications. It can be used for spraying medicine and feeding food and bait. The price of the Bear plane is $410,000, but if you buy it, there will be a certain discount. The price is about $370,000. Moreover, this model is sold all over the country, so it's convenient for you to pick it up at any time. Hearing Maxie Williams's words, Jiang Hai remembered that it seemed to be like this. I want the Model F. He didn't even need to think about it. Even if he bought a private jet in the future, it was impossible to buy an air tractor modified. Not to mention the Model A. $380,747, he had to at least buy something similar. But now, those were just floating clouds. After all, his manor didn't have any income yet. Okay, F-type air tractor. There is a sales place in New York. You can choose to see it yourself, or you can choose to buy it for you. Hearing that Zhang Hai has decided, Maxie Williams also said sweetly, "Then I'll buy it myself." It wasn't that Zhang Hai didn't trust American Express. It was mainly because he was a farmer. It was also known as persecutory paranoia. He had been thinking about what if these guys were lying to him. He could think about other things, but if the plane suddenly broke down in the middle of the flight, who could he cry to? At that time, he would be all alone. The little savings in the bank and this manor would all be taken by the American government. In the spirit of not letting anyone take advantage of the American government, Zhang Hai decided to go see it himself. "Okay, Mr. Zhang. The New York Farm aircraft is sold at XX Street in Manhattan. If you need anything, you can call me at any time." Maxie Williams smiled and said when she heard that Zhang Hai had decided to go see it himself. After the phone call, Zhang Hai fell into deep thought. Originally, he wanted to go to New York soon because he still had the tickets that Moses Adams had helped him get. As a basketball enthusiast, he could only watch the All-Star game in front of the TV in the past. Now that he finally had the chance to go live, he couldn't let it go. Therefore he had to go. Now, he just had to bring it forward. Zhang Hai had already decided that the All-Star game would end on February 16th, Huaxia time. After watching the game, he would take a flight back to Huaxia that night. Including the transfer time, it would be around February 18th. He had to go back on New Year's Eve. It wouldn't delay him from burning Joss paper. After spending New Year's at home, he could bring Fu Yuan and the others over to play. As for the others, if they were free, they could come over and play. He didn't lack the money to play with them anyway. However, there was a problem. Delina and Marion had just been adopted by him this year. Although they could now live in Zhang Hai's house, there would still be people from the welfare agency coming to check on them from time to time. Most importantly, in order to prevent Zhang Hai from being a human trafficker, he didn't allow them to leave the United States with him. It wasn't a problem to go to New York to watch the game, but it seemed that he couldn't go back to China. He had to discuss this with them. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but look at Delina and Marion. Seeing Zhang Hai's gaze, the two girls looked at each other. It was obvious that they didn't understand the reason. When they saw Zhang Hai looking at them, they looked at Zhang Hai and blinked. "Oh, you too." Seeing their actions, Zhang Hai was amused. He couldn't help but rub their heads. Some things had to be said eventually. It wasn't his style to hesitate. Chapter 152. Are you guys really not going? Really not going? Standing in front of his F-650, Zhang Hai looked at the two sisters in front of him with a serious expression. When the two sisters heard Zhang Hai's words, they blinked their big eyes. After looking at each other, they shook their heads very seriously. Well, sometimes people like to think too much. Obviously, Zhang Hai was such an existence. He originally thought that if he were to leave, Xiao Huang, Xiao Bai, Dai, Qiu, Elena, and Marion would be very sad, very uncomfortable, and very reluctant to leave. It turned out that it was just an illusion. After he made his decision that day, he told the two girls that he was going to return to China during dinner that night. After he finished speaking, the two girls did not cry, throw a tantrum, get angry, or throw a tantrum. At that time, the two girls just looked at him seriously and nodded to show that they understood. Then, he said in disbelief that he was going to watch an NBA game and asked them if they wanted to go. Who knew that they weren't interested in it either? It was understandable. Girls, especially a girl who couldn't even eat her fill in the past, would not have the time and energy to be interested in basketball and the NBA. So they weren't willing to go. Originally, this should have been a good thing for Zhang Hai. He could go to New York without worry and go home without worry. But why did he feel so unhappy when he saw the two girls' nonchalant expressions? These days, he had been beating around the bush and asking the two girls if they were really not going. In the end, the answer he got was, haha, they were not going. In fact, Zhang Hai did feel that he was a bit too important. The two girls stayed with him not because they liked him or were overly dependent on him, but because they really needed a place to take them in. Otherwise, Deliana would not have taken the initiative to give herself to him after she decided to stay. They did not treat Zhang Hai as their father. Indeed, it was not easy to treat a man who was only 13 years older than them as their father. Their original idea was that even if Deliana had to sacrifice her body, she would still want to give her sister a good living environment. Even if she became Jiang Hai's lover, she would still have a better life. However, they did not expect Jiang Hai to be so good to them. In fact, it was not just them, even the 8 women had the same idea. In their opinion, the reason why Jiang Hai was willing to take them in and let them stay in the manor to help out was secondary. It was very likely that Jiang Hai liked them. For them, using their bodies in exchange for a place to live and food to eat, they had already acquiesced. Becoming a tool for Jiang Hai to vent his anger was better than living a life of not being able to eat enough, not being able to wear warm clothes, living in a wooden shed, and trembling in fear. They never had the luxury of living like a normal person. In fact, even if Jiang Hai had asked them to sleep in their own rooms, they wouldn't have had any objections. Similarly, after these days, they found that they were really living in a dream. This Jiang Hai didn't seem to have any other thoughts about them. This made them feel touched, but also a little guilty. After all, they didn't have an official job. Although the hardware of the wine manor was there, they still needed to wait until the beginning of spring, which was March, to plant grapes. Recently, they had been eating for free. Moreover, Jiang Hai didn't want their bodies, which made them feel sorry for Jiang Hai. Therefore, during the day, they would always stay in Jiang Hai's villa to help with work, clean up, bathe Little White and the others, take care of things and so on. Even at night, they would always stay until very late. In fact, they were hinting to Jiang Hai that he could let them stay. However, Jiang Hai really didn't know anything about this aspect. Even after so many days, he still couldn't figure it out. He only thought that these girls came to his house every day mainly because they had nothing to do during the day. Moreover, the other women in the manor were also very wary of them. They had no place to go, and they were somewhat dependent on him, so they came to his house every day. It turned out that Jiang Hai was indeed thinking too much. Since the grass seeds were scattered, everything went according to plan. 3 days after the grass seeds were scattered, the grass seed company made a special trip to check how many grass seeds were left on the seabed after the previous scattering. Then they replanted 2 more times. The grass seeds were completely planted by the grass seed company. Edouard Anderlin had been watching by the other party's side. This was not because Jiang Hai was narrow-minded, but because he did not feel at ease if he did not send someone to watch over these things. Compared to these people, he was more at ease with Edouard Anderson, whom he had trusted for a few months. After Anderson confirmed that the grass seeds had begun to grow and reach the expectations, Jiang Hai did not withhold the payment and directly transferred the balance to the company. Having such a straightforward customer, the company's manager was also quite happy. After all, Jiang Hai's job was a big one. Doing such a job was equivalent to his usual quarterly earnings. As long as it was done well, Jiang Hai would inevitably need to replenish the sea of grass every year. At that time, even if the company did not earn that much at one time, it would still be a considerable income. Because of this, he specially gave Jiang Hai a discount. For things like discounts, Jiang Hai naturally did not refuse. After all, he did not have a proper income yet. After half a month of growth, the seaweed officially grew and began to take root and germinate. The construction period of the second wave of the fishery had arrived. At this time, live bait would be put in. In fact, it was called live bait, but it was mainly 4 kinds of creatures. Of course, it was not the real cuttlefish, but the cuttlefish. It was not too clear to call it cuttlefish. This cuttlefish was such a small cuttlefish that could not grow up. In China, this cuttlefish was called sycamore flower. It was born to live at the bottom of the marine food chain. This small cuttlefish was the food of almost all aquatic fish. Its only characteristic was that it was extremely large in number, and naturally, it was also very cheap. For example, the cuttlefish that Jiang Hai fed to the fish only cost $300 per ton. A boat of 10 tons of squid was only $3,000, which was quite cheap. In North America, no one ate this kind of squid. Those 2 types of mollusks were the most abundant. After all, each boat only cost $3,000. Considering the number of fish that Jiang Hai wanted to raise, 20 boats of each type would be enough, although he would have to replenish them on a regular basis. After all, Jiang Hai was free-range, and they could reproduce on their own. 10 boats only cost $30,000, so 40 boats in total would be settled for $120,000. Compared with those 2 types of food, the other 2 types of food were slightly more expensive. As for the other 2 types of creatures, One was the Arctic prawn. Since it didn't matter how big or small it was also sold by the ton. However, a ton of these prawns cost $2,000, which was $2 per kilogram. They were all alive, so it wasn't that expensive. Zhang Hai liked these kinds of prawns very much, so he bought 10 boats of them for $200,000. In addition, there were also some miscellaneous shellfish. These shellfish didn't have much meat, and their shells made up most of their weight. However, these shellfish were indispensable, because apart from fish, Zhang Hai also raised a lot of crabs and lobsters. These shellfish were mainly their food, so in addition to the fact that the shells of these shellfish were too heavy, they were basically uncountable. 10 tons of shellfish and 9 tons of shells. Even so, 1 ton still cost $500, or 50 cents per kilogram, which was almost double the price of cuttlefish and octopus. However, in order to raise the lobsters and crabs that he would raise in the future, Zhang Hai still reluctantly bought 30 boats of these things. Each boat weighed 10 tons, which was $150,000. In addition, there were other miscellaneous items, which cost Zhang Hai $500,000 in total. Ever since Zhang Hai's seaweed began to rise, the company that he contacted would put in one or several boats of these baits in different areas every day or two. They wouldn't put them in all at once. This was because if they put in too many baits at the beginning, they would swim away in groups. Therefore, they had to wait for these guys to digest for a while before pouring them in slowly. This was considered a delicate job. Fortunately, all of this was within the process that Edouard Anderson and Zhang Hai had discussed. The entire month of February was used to spread the bait, and it was only in March that the fry were officially put in. Because recently, the deaf and mute girls in the family often helped with the chores, Zhang Hai didn't even need to wash his own socks. So he had more time to put his energy into the manor's construction, especially the construction of the runway and hangar. Although he couldn't help much, it didn't stop him from watching from the sidelines. As the weather gradually warmed up, the snow gradually melted, and the sun in the middle of February gradually raised the temperature above zero. Time gradually passed, and it was February 12th. There were only 2 days left until the first day of the All-Star Weekend, which was February 14th. Zhang Hai still had to go to New York to buy a plane, so it was time for Zhang Hai to leave. Chapter 153. Alright then, I'll be leaving. Xiao Bai, Xiao Huang, Buck, you guys have to listen to me. Chirp chirp, don't let it eat too much recently. This bird has become too fat. Also, you guys have to take good care of yourselves. Every night before you go to bed, you have to video call me. Do you understand? Looking at the two big lolas who didn't care about his expression at all, Zhang Hai's heart turned cold. But even so, he was still like a father, telling them everything. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, although the two girls didn't have any expression on their faces, they were telling the truth. From their trembling hands and trembling eyes, it could be seen that they were very touched. It had been a long time since someone cared about them like this. You guys too. If there's anything, you can video call me at any time. After instructing the girls, Zhang Hai raised his head and looked at the 8 women who came to send him off, then said to them, "Let's go." These girls originally didn't have cell phones. For them, cell phones were useless because they couldn't make calls. Although cell phones could video still cost data. No one would think that making a call in the United States didn't cost money, right? They originally didn't even have money for food, so it was impossible for those people to arrange cell phones for them. After they came to Zhang Hai's place, Zhang Hai also gave each of them a cell phone. It was the latest iPhone 5S from Apple. Don't think that this thing is very expensive. It turned out that Apple really wasn't expensive in the United States. The 3 cell phones came with 16G, 32G, and 64G, and the contract phone cost $199, $299, and $399 respectively. Of course, this was referring to the contract phone. This meant that when they bought it, they had to pay a 15% activation fee and a 7% tax. In total, they had to pay $199, which was $227. After that, they had to go through the procedures. Every month, they would have to pay $20 for the phone and $20 for the data package. In other words, it would be $40 a month. Some people said that this wasn't appropriate. $40 a month, that would be $960 for 2 years. The price of a non-contract phone was $649, which was actually much more expensive. Zhang Hai chuckled at this. It seemed that they were trying to change the topic. It seemed that the cost of the cell phone and the package added up to $1,200. Compared to $650, it was $550 more expensive. However, who would buy a cell phone and make a call for less than $600 in 2 years? No one would be naive enough to think that calling in the United States would cost RMB. Of course, the main reason why they didn't buy a contract phone in China was because the quality of the two things were different. But in the United States, they didn't have to worry about this, because if they broke, they could be replaced. Therefore, the girls in Zhang Hai's manor each had a $199 iPhone 5S. It was a very expensive configuration in China, but in the United States it was really a low-grade equipment. After buying the phones for the girls, Zhang Hai taught them how to use it. They could send messages and video chat. This way they would have a communication tool in the future. We will take good care of ourselves. Don't worry. Hearing Zhang Hai's nagging, Daliana slowly gestured. These days, she had been teaching Zhang Hai sign language every night. Although the progress was a little slow, the effect was good. At the very least, Zhang Hai had a preliminary understanding of some of the words. In normal communication, he could even guess the correct words. Finally, the problem of communication between the two was solved. Zhang Hai felt that his blood might be helpful to the defects of these girls, but he was still not too sure. Secondly, he didn't know much about these girls, so he still needed to take it slow. Moreover, the most important thing was that he was about to level up. He wanted to level up first. Well, boss, if you don't leave now, the plane will be too late. Just when Zhang Hai was about to mutter, Belle, who was sitting in his car, couldn't help but smile and say. Because Zhang Hai was going back to China directly from New York, he didn't plan to drive. Well, take care of yourself. I'm leaving. After saying a few more words to these girls, Zhang Hai stepped on his car. After Zhang Hai sat down, Belle also started the engine and went out of the manor. Watching Zhang Hai leave, the girls also bit their lips. They really couldn't see through Zhang Hai. Maybe this guy is really a good person. At this time, Zhang Hai didn't know that he had been given 10 good person cards. Soon after the car left the manor, it got on the road and went straight to the highway. Boston Airport was outside Boston, and it was in the same direction as Winthrop. That was to say, Boston Airport and Winthrop were in the middle, so he didn't need to go to Boston Airport to go to the airport. In less than half an hour, Zhang Hai had already arrived at Boston Airport. Because he had already booked a ticket online, he directly changed his ticket and went through the security check. This time, he went to New York, which could be said to be returning to China. He almost didn't bring anything with him. He just brought 2 sets of clothes, that's all. First, he didn't have any relatives in China. He felt that he was going back mainly to visit his parents' graves. He was too lazy to visit relatives. Second, his local specialties couldn't be brought directly on the plane. Did he have to bring a pile of premium-grade beef to New York to watch the game? So before this, he had already used air courier to send these things back to China. He first asked his brothers to help him keep them, and he would distribute them when he went back. So naturally, at this time, he was going light. After passing the security check, Zhang Hai didn't go directly to the waiting hall, but went to the waiting room of the first-class cabin. Although it was only 2 to 3 hours drive from Boston to New York, since he was going to take a plane, with Zhang Hai's current wealth, he would take the first-class cabin. Not only would he take it here, but he would also take the best one back home. It was not that he was pretentious, it was purely because he had money to burn. Well, after he had money, he really didn't want to squeeze into the economy cabin anymore. Anyway, in his opinion, the price of the first-class cabin and the economy cabin was not much different. Soon after sitting in the waiting hall of the first-class cabin, there was a message that they were ready to board the plane. Passengers in the first-class cabin were given priority to board the plane. After lamenting that the flight attendants of American Airlines were really ugly, Zhang Hai nestled on the huge sofa and prepared for the plane to take off. Not long after, the plane took off. Zhang Hai also leaned on the sofa and fell asleep. But before he could fall asleep, the plane had already arrived. Boston and New York were too close. It was so close that even if an NBA team played a game, they would take a bus instead of going to the airport. Because of the time spent waiting at the airport, they might have already arrived by car. Only Jiang Hai, who was not going to drive, would take a plane. Of course, in fact, he could take a long-distance bus, which was not slow, but when he thought about squeezing in a bus with so many people, Jiang Hai still felt that it was better to take a plane, even if all the flight attendants on this plane were over 40 years old and had waists of more than 2 feet 6 inches. A little more than an hour later, the plane landed on the tarmac of New York's JFK Airport. As the ground crew connected the covered bridge, Jiang Hai and the other first-class passengers also got off the plane early. As soon as he walked out of the airport, Jiang Hai saw a black car in the distance. The car was not unfamiliar to Jiang Hai, and he was even more familiar with the person standing in front of the car. "Hey boss, you're here." Seeing Jiang Hai walking towards his car, Moses Adams, who was standing in front of the car, also greeted him with a smile and said to Jiang Hai with a happy face. Since he knew that Jiang Hai liked basketball, and he got Jiang Hai's tickets, it was not a big deal for him to come and watch the game with Jiang Hai. In order to keep a potential and powerful customer like Jiang Hai, he was very careful. "You've been here for a long time?" Jiang Hai asked Moses Adams with a smile as he walked in front of him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams immediately waved his hand. "Oh, no, I just arrived." "Come on, boss, I'll take you to the hotel. I've arranged everything." Hearing what Moses Adams said, Jiang Hai smiled, then threw his small bag in the back seat and sat in the passenger seat of Moses Adams' car. After seeing Jiang Hai sit down, Moses Adams also took him to the center of New York City. This was Jiang Hai's first time in New York, so as soon as he entered the city, he looked around curiously. For Jiang Hai, New York's name was much more important than his own sense of existence. New York, the largest city in New York State, the largest city in the United States, and the largest city in the world. It was the most densely populated city in the United States. Its existence could directly affect the world's economy, finance, media, politics, education, entertainment, and even the fashion industry. Its GDP was also the world's largest. Before that, it was the capital of Japan. As soon as the car drove into New York, Jiang Hai felt the difference between this city and Winthrop, or even Boston. The pace of life here was faster, the people here were more hurried, the buildings were higher, and there were more cars. As soon as he arrived here, it gave people a very busy feeling. Maybe he was used to staying in the manor recently. When he suddenly arrived here, Jiang Hai was really not used to it. Maybe he saw Jiang Hai's curiosity about the city. Moses Adams, who acted as a driver beside him, also kept introducing the city. However, Jiang Hai only took a cursory look. If he wanted to see the sights here in New York, it would take at least a few days, but he obviously didn't have so much time to visit here. He had already arranged everything for these days. He would rest here today, go to Space City tomorrow, and go to All Stars the day after tomorrow. Chapter 154. Look, this is our destination this time, the home court of the New York Knicks MSG. As Moses Adams introduced the place, Jiang Hai also observed the existence of the City of Hope and Destruction. After about an hour of driving into the city, the car finally arrived at the first stop. As Moses Adams stepped on the brakes, a huge circular building appeared in front of Jiang Hai. The building was really big, like a big cake. Although it was not as big as the high-rise buildings next to it, it was still very surprising. However, the most surprising thing was that it was not only a court, but also a station. MSG, Madison Square Garden's nickname, New York's locals, or people nearby, call it that, is above New York's largest Penn station. This is done so that everyone who comes to New York by train can see it first after getting off the train and understand the city. Boss, you may not know this, but this arena is not just the home court of the Knicks. It is also the home court of the New York Rangers, New York Liberty, St. John's University, Red Storm University, and other teams. It is also the place where all musicians, speakers, and politicians in the United States hold their concerts or speeches the most. Looking at the building in front of him, Moses Adams's shrewd eyes revealed a rare look that was not so shrewd. For him, even if he was not working in New York now, this building still made him very proud. Looking at his expression, Jiang Hai also smiled. Perhaps this was like the Great Wall and the Forbidden City in China. After all, the history of the United States was only a short period of time. They did not have any historical deposits, and they could not recognize the Native Americans who had lived on this land for a long time as their ancestors. Therefore, they did not have a sense of historical achievement and belonging that could make them feel more proud. It was also because of this that the United States had also supported some landmark buildings over the years, giving them special meanings other than architecture. Obviously, Madison Square Garden was one of them. Everyone who was familiar with basketball knew that Madison Square Garden was the mecca of the basketball world. Every year, the NBA draft was held there. In addition to the NBA, the other leagues also had special feelings for this place. All right, boss, let's come back the day after tomorrow. We have to go back to the hotel now. Put down your luggage and have dinner. I have arranged a special program for you tonight. Perhaps Moses Adams was done lamenting. He retracted his gaze and became shrewd again. Then, he looked at Zhang Hai and winked gently. This made Zhang Hai feel a little strange. Show. What program? Don't forget, we have to buy a plane tomorrow. Yes, this time, Zhang Hai asked Moses Adams to come, not only to accompany him to watch the game, but also to buy a plane, and he needed his help to take a look. Don't worry, boss. It won't affect our business. Moses Adams knew how important the plane Zhang Hai wanted to buy was to his manner, so he just smiled. Then, he walked back to the car, started the engine, and left. The hotel Zhang Hai was going to stay at tonight was not particularly far from here. It did not take long for them to arrive. When the car was parked, a doorman took the initiative to open the door for Zhang Hai and Moses Adams to get out of the car. After standing still, Zhang Hai looked up. Wow, it was really a famous hotel, the Hilton Hotel. Speaking of this hotel, not only in the United States, but also internationally, it had a great reputation. This hotel was founded in 1919 by the emperor of the hotel industry, the hotel tycoon, Conrad Hilton. Their hotels existed in Europe, America, the Asia-Pacific region, and even the Middle East and Africa. It could be said that this was the top 5-star hotel in the world. It was Zhang Hai's first time staying in such a hotel. Boss, this way please. Seeing Zhang Hai standing at the door, Moses Adams, who was about to walk in, stepped back and said to him. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Zhang Hai also smiled a little awkwardly, carried his backpack, and walked into the hotel. Looking at this hotel from the outside, it was magnificent enough. But after walking in, one would find that the outside was the outside, and the inside was actually the most dazzling. Not only was the decoration extremely high-end, even the waiters passing by were handsome men and women, making it easy for people to have a good impression of this place. While Zhang Hai was still looking around, Moses Adams had already gone to change the room card, because he had already booked it. There were 2 standard suites. Although they were not presidential suites, they were not bad. According to Moses Adams, in addition to the master bedroom, there was a separate living room, bathroom, dining room, and a room similar to a chess room. It was very spacious. Recently, it was the All-Star weekend, and there were many rich people and celebrities who came to watch the game. If it were not for his own connections, it would not have been so easy to book a suite here. Boss, let's go. I know you Huaxia people are particular about this. This is for you. After briefly explaining to Zhang Hai, he handed a room card to Zhang Hai. The room number on the card was 8888. Looking at the room number and listening to Moses Adams' words, Zhang Hai also smiled. Indeed, Huaxia people were particular about this. Because neither of them had luggage naturally, there was no bellboy to take them to the room, which saved them a lot of tips. When they arrived at the door of the room, Moses Adams, who lived not far from Zhang Hai, called out to Zhang Hai. Boss, when you go back in a while, you can take a shower and change your clothes. Then, we'll go for dinner first. After dinner, I'll take you to a good place to play. Seeing Moses Adams raise his eyebrows, although Zhang Hai was not too sure, from his words and actions, he felt that this guy was definitely up to no good. He was not worried that this guy would kidnap him or anything like that. Zhang Hai was not that easy to deal with. According to Zhang Hai's estimation, this guy wanted to use a man's way to get to know him. If a man wanted to have a better friendship with another man, other than being gay, there were only 4 ways. Whether it was at home or abroad, such things were not uncommon. TSK, this guy is really wretched, but it's not bad to go and have a look. Cough, I decided to go and have a look because I want to criticize the justice of this evil world. It's not because I haven't had sex for 2 or 3 years. Looking at Moses Adams, who was far away, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise a middle finger at him, and then he whispered. But why did it feel like the more he whispered, the softer his voice became? After entering the room, Jiang Hai did listen to Moses, Adams and took a shower first. The bathtub in this suite also had a massage function, which was quite comfortable. Originally, after taking a shower, he was ready to sleep, but for some reason, he couldn't fall asleep in bed. The wretched look of Moses, Adams talking to him just now kept replaying in front of him, which made him a little, overwhelmed. In fact, Jiang Hai really hadn't touched a woman for a while. Damn, this damn guy. Cursing again, Jiang Hai rolled on the bed. He didn't know when he fell asleep. When he was awakened by Moses, Adams knocking on the door, it was already 4:30. When he saw Jiang Hai's sleepy appearance, Moses, Adams smiled. I say, boss, you can really fall asleep. Haha, don't sleep. Wash your face. Let's go eat. The show will start in a while. When Moses Adams mentioned the show, Jiang Hai's eyes lit up in an instant. Okay, wait for me. After saying that, Jiang Hai went back to the room, washed his face, then put on a new set of clothes and walked out. But just as he walked out, he was stopped by Moses, Adams. Boss, didn't you bring other clothes? Change to something more expensive. After thinking about it, Moses, Adams considered Jiang Hai's usual dressing habits and changed his words to remind Jiang Hai. Who the F***CK? Isn't this expensive enough? Brand. Archaeopteryx. When he heard Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows raised. In the beginning, it's just a bird. This dress, no matter how expensive it is still outdoor. Have you ever seen someone wearing outdoor clothes to pick up girls? Boss, with all due respect, girls nowadays are very realistic. If you don't encounter ghosts crying and gods howling, it's better to pay more attention to your dressing. Hearing Jiang Hai's shocked words, Moses Adams showed a helpless expression and slowly explained to him, but his words made Jiang Hai speechless. The problem is, I don't have other clothes. I don't like to wear other clothes. Glancing at the room, Jiang Hai came out this time with a total of 3 sets of clothes. He wore one set and brought 2 sets, but unfortunately, these 3 sets of clothes were all outdoor. A long time ago, Jiang Hai liked to wear sportswear for nearly 10 years, but in recent years, he liked to wear outdoor clothes. It didn't look so young, it was comfortable, and it didn't restrict his activities. For example, he didn't like suits at all. Even casual suits, he didn't like to wear them, so he didn't have any of them. The only one he had was the one he wore when he married Lu Li. When he left, he also left it at Qi Li's house. It was made for him by her family. Since it's just clothes, then that's it, but we need to add some other things. Scratching his head, since Jiang Hai didn't want to wear it, then Moses Adams couldn't force Jiang Hai to wear a suit, right? He could only think of other ways. Chapter 155. Moses Adams was now very glad that he had considered enough time, so he came to call Jiang Hai at 4:30. If he had really called Jiang Hai on time, it was estimated that it would be too late now. Since Jiang Hai did not want to change his clothes, he had to think of other ways. The two of them went downstairs without eating. They got into the car that was already at the door and went straight to New York's Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue was an important thoroughfare in the Manhattan area of New York. It ran from north to south, from Washington Square Park in the south to 138th Street in the north. There were many scenic spots on Fifth Avenue. From south to north, there was the Empire State Building, the New York Public Library, Rockefeller Center, Rockefeller Foundation, St. Patrick's Church, Central Park, and so on. But at this time, Moses, Adams and Jiang Hai did not come here to see the scenic spots. Instead, they came to the section between 60th Street and 34th Street, a place called Dream Street. Almost all the luxury brands in the world gathered here. It was one of the most high-end shopping districts in the world. Someone calculated that the shops on this street had an annual rent of $1,000 per square foot, about 0.09 square meters. That was to say, 1 square meter would cost more than $10,000. The annual rent of a small shop here was more than $100,000. It could be seen that if one did not open for 3 years and open for 3 years, one would lose a lot of money. Of course, those luxury stores were not those that did not open for business for 3 years, nor were they those that opened for business for 3 years. But even so, most of the time it was the season when people would see more and buy less. The only exception was probably when the Xueqi tour group came. Those aunties were very rich. Moses Adams dragged Jiang Hai here to buy things, but he did not expect to earn a commission. Men and women were two completely different life forms. The values, psychology, and so on of these two life forms were completely different. Even if they paid attention to the opposite sex, their viewpoints were naturally different. When men looked at women, the first thing they looked at was the face, the second was the figure, and the third was the clothes, the way they dressed and the way they talked. Only then would they have the idea to explore further. But women looked at men differently. Just like what the ancients once said, girls love pretty boys, and girls love girls. When girls were young, that is, when they were 16 or 17 or 17 or 18, they paid more attention to the boys' looks and popularity. For example, the captain of a basketball team, the captain of a football team, and so on were very popular. Of course, if they were handsome and had such skills, they would be the favored son of God, commanding the wind and clouds of the school. However, as they grew older, the things that girls paid more attention to gradually changed. Perhaps for some girls, looks were still very important. But for most girls, especially the girls who were going to the place Jiang Hai and Moses Adams were going, looks were obviously not as attractive as Franklin. For these women, they could judge a man's general situation by looking at his things. Unless you're really famous, like Bill Gates. Even if he wore briefs and walked barefoot on the streets, countless women would still throw themselves at him. If you're not that famous, then you'll have to rely on these external factors. Of course, some people might say that such women were not sincere. Love did not need to be tarnished like this. However, Moses Adams would tell you, who needed her to be sincere? Love. Even if there was, it was impossible to give it to them. This was also the reason why Jiang Hai came here. How to judge whether a man was rich or not, whether he had the strength. For a woman, the simplest preliminary judgment was 3 points. First, what kind of clothes, second, what kind of car, and third, what kind of watch. He didn't want to change Jiang Hai's clothes, so he let it go. He also couldn't buy a car now, so he let it go. The most likely thing to show that he was rich was a watch. It was said that the poor played with cars, the rich played with watches, the loser played with mobile phones, and the rich played with supercars. But for Jiang Hai, he had only heard about it before. He really did not play with these. Although he was not sure of money now, in terms of his realm, he was still in the category of playing with mobile phones. Now, Moses Adams wanted him to skip the level of playing with cars and directly upgrade to playing with watches. He really couldn't bear it. We're here. But Moses Adams was still very considerate of his boss. He drove the car over and parked it directly in front of a building. After the two got out of the car, Jiang Hai also followed Moses Adams into the shop. "Hello, sir, what can I do for you?" When the two of them walked in, a good-looking girl came out with a smile that showed 8 teeth. She asked the two respectfully, but when she asked, her eyes were mainly looking at Moses Adams. Judging from his aura and clothes, it was obvious that he was the one who was in charge. "My boss wants to buy a watch, so I brought him here to see it." Moses Adams was a smart person. He immediately saw that the other party did not seem to take Jiang Hai too seriously, so he immediately said seriously and specifically mentioned Jiang Hai. "This way, please." As soon as she heard Moses Adams' words, the saleswoman couldn't help but be stunned, but she quickly reacted and continued to smile, taking the two to the counter next to her. This is the Legacy series of Vacheron Constantin, and it is also the best watch we sell here recently. This series of watches ranges from thousands of dollars to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Many friends from Xueqi like this series very much. Our brand can also be regarded as one of the top in the world. In the 007 series, most of the watches of the male leads were sponsored by us. Looking at Jiang Hai, the saleswoman here began to talk non-stop. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai, who was still a little dazed, gradually recovered. Looking at the watch pointed by the woman, Jiang Hai glanced at it, but he was also shocked by what he saw. As expected of a luxury watch, this watch was really ridiculously expensive. It looked just like the Legacy series that the woman had just mentioned. Yes, there were cheap watches. The ones that cost $7,000 to $8,000 did not look good. A Vacheron Constantine that cost $7,000 to $8,000 did not look much different from the ones sold on the streets. The only difference was that the watch was made with a hollow design. However, these watches were ridiculously expensive. The one that Zhang Hai had his eyes on had a price tag of $150,000. That was no joke. $150,000 was enough for him to buy 50 boats of cuttlefish. This price was really a little scary. Can I not buy this watch? After hesitating for a moment, Zhang Hai looked at Moses Adams. He was a little reluctant to part with it. How should I put it? Actually, it's fine. This is mainly up to you, boss. To be honest, whether you buy it or not is not a big problem for me. The main thing is not for tonight's operation. After all, one night is not worth more than $100,000. However, boss, don't you know that after the All-Star game, there will be an NBA cocktail party? There will be a lot of dignitaries at that party. Even if you don't want to have too much contact with these people. I remember that you said that you would come to New York in April to participate in the beef show. Sometimes it is necessary to have some connections. Seeing Zhang Hai's reluctance, it was actually very difficult not to see it. Because right now, Zhang Hai's face was almost wrinkled into the word reluctance. Spending $100,000 to buy a useless watch. Zhang Hai was really speechless. But after hearing Moses Adams' words, Zhang Hai could not help but click his tongue. It was just as Moses Adams had said. When a person's fame had not reached a certain level, the strength of their clothing was also very important. At least it gave people the feeling that this guy was not trying to get something for nothing. Although Zhang Hai did not think that his beef would be sold out, he had many friends. However, he understood the problem of having more friends, more options. So, he was a little tempted by what Moses Adams said. If I don't buy it, I'll buy the best one. Miss, what's the most expensive watch you have? After struggling for a long time, Zhang Hai took a deep breath and cursed. Then, as if he had thought it through, he raised his head and spoke to the salesperson in front of him. Oh, the best watch we have is Patek Philippe. It is known as the blue-blooded aristocrat of watches. That's it. What's the most expensive one? Since he had already decided to spend money, Zhang Hai did not care about the price and directly asked. At present, in addition to the limited edition and special custom-made watches, the most expensive one is this series of men's watches with complex functions. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the salesperson here said with a serious face. Then, he went to a counter next to him and took out a watch. Zhang Hai looked at it and his vision went a little dark because it was clearly marked 980,000, 98,000. It seems that the bragging has gone too far. Looking at the price and then at the small broken watch, Zhang Hai did not hear what the salesperson was explaining. What platinum dial? What nonsense? He did not understand. He just felt that his ears were ringing. His eyes were also staring at the watch. He could not see how this watch was valuable. Sir, are you sure you want this watch? Seeing that Zhang Hai's state was a little strange, the salesperson asked carefully. Yes. Listening to the salesperson's words, Zhang Hai took 3 deep breaths again. In the end, he almost gritted his back molar and used the strength of his teeth to force out the word he did not want to say from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, he handed over the bank card. Okay, I'll wrap it up for you right away. This is my business card. If you have any questions or need any consultation, you can call the number on the card. I'm on 24 hours a day. The moment Zhang Hai handed over the card, all the female salespeople in the room looked at Zhang Hai differently. Especially this girl, who almost swiped the card for Zhang Hai, filled in the form, and so on. Finally, she handed over a personal business card and looked at Zhang Hai seriously and firmly. Chapter 156. Now that it's done, let's go eat. Returning to Moses Adams's car, Zhang Hai opened the gift box in his hand, then took out the watch inside and put it on his left wrist. As for the gift box, he was certainly reluctant to throw it away. He simply put it in the tidying box in front of the passenger seat. After listening to Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams started the car and winked at Zhang Hai. Of course, with such a watch, what kind of banquet can't you go to? Haha, in fact, boss, I think you don't have to care about the banquet. Didn't you see the look in the eyes of the waiters here just now? As long as you call this number tonight, I promise you will have a very happy night. What do you mean? Obviously, Jiang Hai was still too inexperienced. When he heard Moses Adams's words, he was stunned. What does this mean? Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Moses Adams also smiled. His boss is really inexperienced. It's very simple. Didn't the waitress just say that it's on 24 hours a day? She can explain the function of this watch to you on the spot. If you don't get anything tonight, then you can call her and tell her your room number. When a beauty comes, it's inevitable that she will have a meal, watch a movie, and then go back to your room to study the watch. It's almost very late. It's so late. It's not good to let a girl go back alone. Hearing Moses Adams say this, Jiang Hai immediately interrupted, I can send her back. Ah. But after Jiang Hai finished speaking, he was embarrassed. Looking at Moses Adams's slightly shocked face, Jiang Hai smiled embarrassedly. In fact, after he finished speaking, he understood what this guy meant. It's good that you understand. Haha, the specific operation still depends on the boss, but tonight you are the backup force. You can go all out and have fun. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams said earnestly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also bit his lip. His heart was really a little itchy. Okay, let's go, let's go. As Moses Adams honked the car horn, the car restarted. Then the two went back to the Hilton Hotel and had a simple dinner in the buffet restaurant there. They waited until 6 o'clock in the evening. When it was almost 7 o'clock, the two finished their meal and left the Hilton Hotel by car. This time, their destination was the Standard Hotel in the meatpacking area of New York's Lower City. Don't look at this 18-story hotel, which looks ordinary, but in fact, the top 2 floors of this hotel are the largest nightclub in New York, the Boom Room. Because the people who can come here to play, except for some young models who want to make a name for themselves, are either rich or noble. This is not like other nightclubs, where you can sneak in by having a good relationship with the security guard at the door. If you don't have an appointment, it is impossible to enter. But even if the 13 spaces here are high, when Jiang Hai appeared in front of the nightclub, he couldn't help but frown. It was not the first time that Jiang Hai went to a nightclub. When he was in China, he went in with his friends because of curiosity. But to be honest, Jiang Hai is not too interested in nightclubs. It is too noisy, and the banging makes people feel very uncomfortable. Don't worry, this is the best. There are a variety of styles, and there will always be something you like. Perhaps seeing that Jiang Hai was not interested in this place, Moses Adams, who was walking in front, said to Jiang Hai with a smile. I hope so. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Then the two entered the nightclub through a special passage, but as soon as they came in, Jiang Hai heard the deafening loud music like other nightclubs, which made him frown. But since he was here, it would be unreasonable if he didn't experience it. He was still patient, enduring the thumping in his chest, and walked into the nightclub. As soon as he walked in, he saw a huge stage. The whole stage was T-shaped. At this time, a rock band was sweating hard on the stage, singing music that Jiang Hai found strange and noisy. Under the stage, countless white-collar workers who had nothing to do after work, or some people who came here purely to flirt and pick up girls, waved their arms and shouted loudly. At the back of the stage, there was a girl dressed simply. She was standing in front of a DJ stand, sometimes flirting and sometimes waving her arms to liven up the atmosphere. There were also many tables and cages in all directions of the room. Inside these tables and cages, there was a girl standing or locked, dancing provocatively. The men below waved money and stuffed the money into their underwear or blouse to get a touch. The whole scene was annoying and extravagant, and Jiang Hai was a little excited. It's too noisy here. Forcibly pulling his gaze back from those simply dressed girls, Jiang Hai pulled the eager Moses Adams and shouted in his ear. Then let's go to the second floor. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Moses Adams now wanted to squeeze himself into the crowd and take advantage of those girls. Maybe he could take 2 back tonight, but Jiang Hai was the boss. If he was not satisfied with this place, then he would not stay here. With great perseverance, he pulled back his gaze and led Jiang Hai to the second floor. When the two of them took the elevator to the second floor, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. This was because the second floor was completely different from the first floor. If the first floor was very dry and wild, then the second floor was very quiet. After getting out of the elevator on the second floor, they entered a passage. The entire second floor had only one color, gold. The entire passage was filled with golden mirrors. On both sides of the passage, there were women wearing all kinds of deep V-necks and all kinds of little dresses that exposed their arms and legs. They were talking and chatting here. Of course, there were also some men mixed in. He leaped over these figures and looked behind them. That was the hall. There was a huge triangular bathtub that was emitting steam, making the entire second floor look like a fairyland. It gave people a hallucinatory feeling. Just as Zhang Hai was looking around curiously, a girl who was closer to them came over with a smile and said to them, "Hello, do you two have an appointment?" This girl looked to be 25 or 26 years old. She was wearing a black deep V-necked dress. The opening almost reached her navel. It could be said that it was two pieces of cloth that wrapped her upper body from top to bottom. It could be clearly seen that she should be wearing nothing inside. Her lower body was also red, and she was wearing a pair of black high-heeled leather shoes. Her brown curly hair, coupled with heavy makeup, really gave people a sense of wild beauty. If some ordinary people can still be mixed in with the first floor, then the people who can go to the second floor are really rich. Hearing the girl's words, Moses Adams said with a chuckle, "I have an appointment in advance. My name is Moses Adams." After Moses Adams signed up, the girl in front of Zhang Hai touched her ear with her hand. Zhang Hai saw that there was a headset in the girl's ear. It seemed that she was confirming the identity of the two people. "Mr. Moses Adams, hello, the room you booked is here." After waiting for about a few seconds, the other party had already confirmed the room Moses Adams had booked. She smiled and led the two of them to a box in the distance. As soon as they walked in, Zhang Hai found that this box was really different, because the floor of this box was actually transparent. They could clearly see the wild people on the first floor under their feet, who were dancing there. But they could see these people, but they couldn't hear any sound. The effect of the compartment here was really good. Of course, if they want to listen, they can do it at any time because the floor can be adjusted. As long as there is a gap, the wild music below can go straight to the second floor, but Zhang Hai didn't want to listen to that music. "What do you two want to drink?" When Zhang Hai looked at his feet curiously, the girl who led them here was not polite at all. She sat directly next to Zhang Hai and Moses Adams and asked the two of them sweetly, "Boss, what do you want to drink?" Hearing the girl's question, Moses Adams also looked at Zhang Hai. Whatever, just give me a dozen beers." After thinking for a while, Zhang Hai recalled his impression of alcohol. It seems that in such a place full of 13 boxes, drinking beer is a bit degrading, but he is really not used to drinking foreign wine. "Well, a bottle of Hennessy, 3 dozen Corona, and the rest, you can do as you see fit." Hearing Moses Adams's words, the girl couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Although they didn't seem to have ordered a lot, the wine alone could be sold for thousands of dollars here. It seemed that the two of them didn't lack money. "Okay, I'll arrange it now." Hearing what Moses Adams said, the girl here also stood up, swaying her body and walked out of the room. In less than 5 minutes, some waiters had already walked into the room with wine glasses, fruit plates, snacks, and so on, filling the small coffee table. Moses Adams didn't care at all. Picking up a piece of watermelon in front of him, Zhang Hai took a bite and asked Moses Adams, "This is the program you talked about?" "Boss, don't worry, the show is just about to start." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams also laughed. Just as he finished speaking, a female voice sounded from the door, "Hey, handsome guys, can we come in and have a drink?" Chapter 157. Following the voice, Zhang Hai looked at the door, only to see that the originally empty door was surrounded by a group of girls after the wine was served. These girls were all wearing very simple clothes, almost similar to the woman who led them in just now. A lot of skin was exposed. Among these women, there were obviously Caucasians, blondes, Latinos, blacks, and even Asians. One by one, they stood outside the door and spoke to the two people in the room. "Welcome, my dear ladies." Hearing these girls' words, before Zhang Hai could react, Moses Adams had already stood up and walked to the door naturally. Then he reached out and put his arm around the shoulders of the two girls standing at the outermost side, leading them into the room. Originally, Zhang Hai was still wondering why they had such a big box with only the two of them. This box was indeed not small. According to the domestic KTV saying, This box was considered an extra-large box. The box had a huge bathroom, a row of huge sofas, and a huge TV screen. This TV screen could be set to singing mode, and it could also be used to watch TV. Of course, the people who came here to play were not here to sing or watch TV. The third function of this TV was to broadcast the performance below live. These girls had obviously been here for a long time. They were not unfamiliar with such a scene. After walking in with Moses Adams, they had already come to the sofa and sat down directly. Many people skillfully poured the wine in front of them or opened the beer. The sofa that Zhang Hai and Moses Adams were sitting on was still very big. At this time, after so many people squeezed in, it became a lot more crowded. Even the two girls beside Zhang Hai were firmly stuck to him. To be honest, this was Zhang Hai's first time encountering such a scene.
From the corner of his eyes, he could clearly see that these girls were barely wearing, very simple clothes, but their prominent vital parts were exposed.
His nose also smelled the scent of various perfumes and body fragrances fused together. Their thighs and upper circumference filled his line of sight, so in an instant, he became hard. Of course, it wasn't that his big brother was hard, but his body was hard. He now felt that his neck was going to have cervical spondylosis. Although it was impossible for him to get this disease since he got the Dragon Balls, he still felt that his neck was hard and painful.
Bang 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 bang.
At this moment, a girl also turned on the TV. It happened to be the live broadcast of the concert below. The harsh sound instantly entered Zhang Hai's mind and also relieved him from the original embarrassment. "Hey miss, please change the channel or lower the volume because my boss doesn't like this kind of music." Moses Adams may have remembered that Zhang Hai didn't like this kind of music, so when he heard this song, he struggled out of the gentle land and said to the girl over there. He said this very skillfully. First, he told these girls that Zhang Hai didn't like this. Second, he also told them that Zhang Hai was actually the big rich man here, not him. From the position of the sofa just now, it could be seen that many of these girls came for him, especially those white girls, who were all gathered around him. Besides the Latino girls, there was only one Asian girl around Zhang Hai. It was not Moses Adams' style to ignore his boss like this. Hearing Moses Adams' words, these girls also looked at Zhang Hai. Their eyes were either surprised, or a little puzzled because they really didn't see any characteristics of a rich man from Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai also chuckled. "Sure enough, girls love money. My dress is too ordinary. Hello, sir. Nice to meet you. My name is Maggie." The Asian girl next to Zhang Hai reacted faster. She smiled, picked up a bottle of beer, and said to Zhang Hai with a smile. This Asian girl, in Zhang Hai's eyes, was very petite. She seemed to be more than 1.5 meters tall. With high heels, she was only 1.6 meters tall. Her originally petite figure looked even more delicate next to these Caucasians. This girl was not like the Asian women that Europeans and Americans had in mind. They all looked like Hua Mulan in the cartoon. This girl was very much in line with the Asian aesthetic point of view. She had curly hair dyed blonde, big baby eyes, a sharp chin, a high nose, delicate skin, small lips, and slightly thick lips. Zhang Hai did not know if she had gone under the knife, nor did he know what she looked like without her makeup, but purely based on her current appearance, she was indeed not bad. "Hello, you can call me Zhang." Zhang Hai naturally did not have stage fright when meeting with beautiful girls. He picked up the beer in front of him and clinked glasses with the other party. When Zhang Hai picked up the beer, the watch he had just bought on his left wrist was also revealed.
As soon as they saw this watch, the eyes of these girls who hung out here all day long lit up instantly.
Their eyes were very sharp, very sharp. Whether a piece of clothing or jewelry was real or not, they could tell at a glance. Zhang Hai's watch must be real. It seemed that Moses Adams' words just now were not just a compliment to Zhang Hai. It seemed that Zhang Hai was really a hot gold mine. Thinking of this, two girls smiled and walked to Zhang Hai's side. As for the other girls, they did not move because for them, although Zhang Hai was a gold mine, after all, there was already someone sitting next to him. If they fell one step behind, it would be easy to fall behind. Instead of thinking about Zhang Hai's problem, they might as well continue to pursue Moses Adams. Moses Adams said that Zhang Hai was the boss mainly to make Zhang Hai more popular, but he was not ready to give up playing. It was naturally the best if someone stayed. Almost instantly, A certain balance was reached on the sofa. There were a total of 13 girls here. 7 were sitting on Jiang Hai's side at this time, and 6 were sitting on Moses Adam's side. It was a very suitable number. Jiang Hai was very passive in this regard, and he did not know how to talk about this, but it did not matter if he did not know how. He just needed to show his financial resources, because these girls naturally had a way to lead the topic. For example, the girl who had just drunk with Jiang Hai smiled and asked Jiang Hai, "Looking at you, you should be Asian. Which country are you from?" "Oh, I'm from Huaxia. What about you?" Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai asked curiously, "Ah, Huaxia, I'm from Japan. You don't hate me, right?" Hearing Jiang Hai say that he was from Huaxia, the girl's face showed a hint of surprise, and then whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. Although Jiang Hai was not a nationalistic youth, to be honest, a Huaxia man, especially a man from the northeast, who did not hate Japanese people, but at this time, in front of him was not a man but a delicate beauty. Jiang Hai really did not know how to answer this question. Hee. By the way, are the cherry blossoms and Mount Fuji really beautiful in your country? Since this question was not easy to answer, Jiang Hai could only change the topic. It was not his turn to care about politics and national affairs. Of course, that's the beauty of our country. Are you interested in our country? How much do you know about Japan? When it came to her country, the girl also talked about it with a trace of pride on her face. To be honest, my understanding of your country is more about movies. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai said a little awkwardly. When she heard Jiang Hai's words, the girl pouted and looked at him with contempt. AI way is just AI way. Although I like my country very much, I know that our country's film industry is not very developed. Except for ghost movies, everything else is very average. You are a big man, it's impossible for you to like watching ghost movies. Hee, tell me, which star do you like? Being exposed by a girl in front of his face, Jiang Hai was indeed a little embarrassed. But when this girl could face him and talk about AI way with him, Jiang Hai suddenly realized that he was still too naive. This wild world. He was somewhat unable to adapt, but he was now trying to adapt. I prefer Aoi and Porto. Oh, and Rio Tian Hai. The stewardess' surname is Aoi, so she should be called Aoi-sensei. She is indeed very powerful. Now she has many sales of her films, which can be ranked in the top 100 in the world. As for Porto, it's Porto no Yui. To be honest, in our country, she is not very famous. She is mainly famous in Huaxia because she looks like a star in Huaxia. Tian Hai. Her original figure wasn't that good. She only became famous after plastic surgery. As for Rio, I also like her a lot. She has a weak sexiness to her. I also watch her videos. I still have the newlyweds and campus beauty pageants on my computer, but she's going to retire this year. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl named Maggie didn't show any trace of shyness. Instead, she followed Jiang Hai and spoke with fervor and assurance. Jiang Hai was listening to her, and he was somewhat stunned. Maggie, I have always been curious. Don't mind me asking this. Are you Japanese women very open? This girl named Maggie was really good at talking, and she did not blush at all when talking about this topic. Taking advantage of the fact that she was a little thirsty and drinking, Jiang Hai also asked her. Because of the popularity of AI Ways movies, many people from different countries would have the same idea. However, this idea was wrong. She then said, there are two extremes. Some women are very open, some are very conservative, but the men are very open. This is because even if a man married to a conservative woman, he will still go out and mess around. Conservative women don't mind. As long as they don't divorce and don't bring him home, it doesn't matter. For example, many of my friends in China put insurance in their husband's briefcase every day. If a man doesn't go out and mess around, he will be looked down upon by others. And if a wife has something to do back home, she will take the initiative to help her husband make an appointment. This is very common in China. This is very common. Wow, then you Japanese men are very happy. Hearing such an outrageous thing, Jiang Hai couldn't help but grin unconsciously. Recruiting by imperial decree. What a powerful nation. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Maggie shrugged and said indifferently, that's why I came to the United States.
Clang.
Just as Jiang Hai and the Japanese girl named Maggie were chatting happily, the door of their room was suddenly opened from the outside. A short blonde kid suddenly rushed in from the outside, holding a huge bottle of champagne in his hand.
He shook it and shouted, "Wow, I'll treat you to a drink." As his voice fell, his fingers that were originally pressing on the mouth of the bottle instantly loosened, and then a column of champagne sprayed directly towards Jiang Hai, Moses Adams, and the girls.
Chapter 158.
Who the F*** CK?
Looking at the champagne column coming towards him, Jiang Hai shouted for the first time. However, the strong physical fitness brought by the Dragon Ball was no joke. His brain hadn't reacted yet, but his body had already reacted at the first moment. He immediately threw himself to the side, but he forgot that there were many people sitting next to him. All of a sudden, he threw himself on the girl named Maggie who was chatting with him just now. Some of the girls next to him were also thrown down by Jiang Hai, but there was no way to stop the champagne from falling from the sky. At the critical moment, Jiang Hai's foot stepped on the ground. In an instant, the originally huge sofa was abruptly turned over by Jiang Hai's foot. This time, not only Jiang Hai, but also the girls sitting on the sofa turned over with him. To be honest, these girls would rather be drenched by the champagne than be turned over like this. One must know that in order to create an atmosphere, the ground here was not covered with carpet, but with hard glass, in order to clearly see the activities on that floor. If they fell to the ground, although the glass would not be broken, it would definitely not feel good. So the moment they lost their center of gravity, these women screamed. Listening to this ear-piercing scream, Jiang Hai also reacted in an instant. He immediately supported himself with his palm and appeared under these women, using himself as a human cushion behind these women. Bang, 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 bang. For consecutive sounds, Jiang Hai also felt that 4 heavy objects were pressing on his body. And these women opened their eyes when they found that they didn't feel any ice or pain. As soon as they saw that Jiang Hai was under them, these women were also stunned for a moment. In fact, not only were they stunned now, Jiang Hai was also stunned. As mentioned before, the clothes these women wore were very simple clothes. Although their lower bodies were wearing underwear, their upper bodies were not. With such a big movement, several women's tops were off. Thinking about that kind of cloth top, if one was not careful, it would easily rub to the side. In an instant, a few inexplicable spots appeared in front of Jiang Hai.
This.
Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai's pupils unconsciously dilated. At this time, these women also discovered that they seemed to be exposed, but among these 4 women, 2 were Latin American, and 1 was an American. They didn't seem to care very much. They even took the initiative to show their majestic existence to Jiang Hai. These women were not special workers. They were not professional workers. Their names were like models. If there were any comic conventions, game shows, car shows and so on, they would also go to the stage or be a couple. Their main purpose was to promote themselves.
Using their bodies to get to know more rich people, people in the entertainment circle, and even stars, this will be of great benefit to their future development.
Maybe one day, when the hype is successful, they will no longer just rely on selling their bodies like now. It is very likely that they will also become artists and enter the upper class. And the simplest way for them to get to know these people is to rely on their bodies. It is precisely because of this that this nightclub has no restrictions on their entry and exit. Just like some gyms, if some beautiful women go to apply for a membership, there will always be a discount. They are also the signboards here. It can be said that both sides have a tacit understanding. Since they are sitting next to Jiang Hai, naturally, they also want to get close to Jiang Hai and show their capital. This is nothing. Only the Japanese girl was shocked. She stood up immediately and wanted to tidy up her clothes. But she forgot that at this time, the champagne rain was still falling outside. As soon as she stood up, the guy at the door noticed her. In an instant, the champagne rain sprayed over, making her wet. After feeling the impact, she screamed again and squatted down, but unfortunately, at this time, she had already become a drowned rat. Her hair, clothes and makeup on her face were all messed up. Jiang Hai was a little speechless, but he had to admit that this girl was very beautiful after putting on heavy makeup. Even if it was messed up now, he could see that her foundation was still very good. Cough. Now is not the time to think about this. Damn it, you dare to show off in front of me you're courting death. Listening to the guy at the door still howling there, Jiang Hai's eyes flashed a fierce light. He was originally a pacifist, but since others came to find him, then he would not be polite. At this time, the guy's main firepower was aimed at the other two sofas. Moses Adams and the others had not had time to dodge. This was an opportunity. Jiang Hai jumped out from behind the sofa, then grabbed a fruit plate on the coffee table in front of him and threw it straight out like a disc. When the guy saw Jiang Hai flash out, he also wanted to spray Jiang Hai, but unfortunately, his reaction was much slower than Jiang Hai's. The fruit plate flew over and hit the guy's nose heavily before his champagne could turn around. There were 3 vital points on the human body. The first was the nose. After being hit, the person would feel dizzy, his nose would ache, and tears would flow. When the guy was hit by Jiang Hai's fruit plate, he immediately gave up the champagne in his hand and hugged his nose with both hands. "Oh, who is it, my nose?" While he was screaming, Jiang Hai had already flashed in front of him. Without saying a word, he kicked the guy directly in the chest. The guy didn't even have time to react. To be exact, he didn't even have time to wipe his tears before he was kicked out of the private room by Jiang Hai. He flew straight to the mirror in the corridor opposite the private room. With a loud bang, the huge golden mirror was also full of cracks from the guy's impact. "Boss!" At this time, the 2 men in black outside the door were also very surprised when they saw the guy flying out. They ran over immediately, wanting to see if the guy was okay. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked out of the room. "Sir, don't move." Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, one of the big men stood up in an instant and stood in front of Jiang Hai. His eyes stared at Jiang Hai. They all saw that their boss flew out of the room. Needless to say, he was beaten out, and now this man was very suspicious. "Ah, my nose, my chest, damn it, damn it, damn it. Who is it? Who is it, you damn guy, you dare to hit me? Teach him a lesson for me." At this time, the man who was just beaten out by Jiang Hai also recovered. He covered his nose with one hand and his chest with the other. He shouted angrily at Jiang Hai in front of him. Hearing his roar, Jiang Hai snorted coldly, then glanced at the 2 bodyguards. Judging from the size of these 2 guys and the murderous aura emitted from their bodies from time to time, these 2 should be soldiers and have seen blood. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to become this guy's bodyguards. However, compared with Bell and Jiang Hai's manner, they were still far behind, let alone him. Jiang Hai was confident that if these 2 guys dared to move, then he would tell them why the flowers were so red. But unfortunately, these 2 people didn't give Jiang Hai such an opportunity. One of them still stood in front of Jiang Hai, just on guard, but didn't intend to make a move. The other one squatted beside the man. "Boss, we are your bodyguards, not your thugs." Listening to the man's words, the man squatting there said coldly. Hearing what this man said, the guy who was still rolling on the ground couldn't help but grit his teeth. These bodyguards are really disobedient. What's wrong, what's wrong? At this moment, a fat middle-aged white man ran in from the outside with a group of security guards. As soon as he saw the tense situation and the man lying on the ground, he took out the handkerchief in his pocket and wiped his sweat. It's this guy again. To be honest, this fat man really doesn't like him. "Hey George, this guy hit me, he hit me. Is there no law here? He dared to hit me." Seeing the fat man coming over, the man lying on the ground couldn't help but shout loudly. "Our boss hit you? That's right, we can even kill you. You ran into our box for no reason and sprayed champagne on us. Don't talk about hitting you, even if we beat you to death, you can see if the police will sentence us." Hearing his roar, Moses Adams, who was in the room at this time, also walked out while wiping his wet hair and said angrily. In fact, no one would be happy if a guy suddenly sprayed champagne on them when they were still flirting with the girls in the room. "Moses Adams is naturally such a person. I was treating you to a drink. I said it the first time I went in that I was treating you to a drink. You didn't thank me, and you even hit me. Do you have any shame?" Hearing Moses Adams' words, the man lying on the ground slowly stood up with the help of his bodyguard. He grinned and pretended to be angry as he roared. "I'm treating you to a drink. Who needs your treat? Besides, your attitude of treating others to a drink is to directly spray champagne on them. If that's the case, then I was treating you to fruit just now." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai directly retorted without saying a word, then pointed to the broken fruit plate on the ground and said to the man with disdain, "What did you say, you damn guy George? He hit me. He actually hit me. How can your nightclub let such a guy in? I'm your VIP, do you understand? Hearing Jiang Hai directly return his words to him, the man was also a little angry. He knew that he couldn't get through to Jiang Hai, so he could only put pressure on the fat manager over there. F***CK your father, this is the manager, right? I also want to get an answer. Why can this guy enter our box? Jiang Hai raised a middle finger to the crazy guy, then turned to the fat man and said coldly. Chapter 159. The fat boss knew this better than anyone else. There was a saying in the United States, if you love him, please let him go to New York. It's heaven there. If you hate him, please let him go to New York. It's hell there. This nightclub was the intersection between heaven and hell. Although the boss behind this nightclub was very powerful, the power of the nightclub didn't represent the power of the fat man. At least, he couldn't afford to offend anyone who came here. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the fat man couldn't help but wipe his sweat more diligently. He was too lazy to pay attention to the kid over there. Instead, he walked to Jiang Hai's side and said to Jiang Hai with a smile, "It's all a misunderstanding, all a misunderstanding. We're all here to have fun. There's no need to be so hostile. Sir, you see, this guy is also a star and you did indeed kick him. If it really gets out of hand, this matter won't be easy to handle. How about we make a small deal out of it? Let's just treat it as making a friend. I'll pay all your expenses tonight, you see." But before he could finish his words, Jiang Hai's hand was already raised, interrupting his words. "Do I lack your money? I'm asking you what to do about this matter, not for you to stir up trouble." This. Although he knew that the guests here weren't to be trifled with, when he saw the watch on Jiang Hai's wrist, he understood that this guy really wasn't someone he could afford to offend because he really didn't lack money. How could he afford to offend someone who could wear nearly $1 million on his wrist? Jiang Hai didn't know that the watch he bought was quite useful. Not only was it useful for flirting with girls, but it was also useful for socializing. You don't have to talk to me about this and that. You're a star. You're probably doing this to become famous. I'll fulfill your wish. Moses, call the police, Jiang Hai said with a wave of his hand and pointed at the guy who had just stood up. I need fame, you guy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the kid seemed to have been greatly insulted. He almost jumped up, pointed at Jiang Hai, and shouted. Jiang Hai listened to him and just gently picked his ear. This guy is Justin Bieber. Seeing Jiang Hai's disdainful look, Moses, Adams hesitated for a moment, then walked in front of Jiang Hai and whispered to him. Although he was very angry, at this time, his cold-blooded lawyer side had awakened. He walked to Jiang Hai's side and whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. Justin Bieber, I seem to have an impression of him. The one who sang Baby, right? Weren't you kicked out of the United States? Why are you still here? Hearing Moses Adams's words, Jiang Hai snorted disdainfully. He didn't know much about stars, but this guy really didn't need fame. His fame in music and private life was enough. Humph. Seeing that Jiang Hai knew about him, this guy didn't say much. After all, he was a public figure. As for the deportation that Jiang Hai mentioned, there was indeed a commotion last year because his influence was too bad. He got into fights, posted those kinds of photos, smashed his neighbor's door, took drugs and so on. It could be said that he was definitely the worst idol. Recently, his master Arthur had been telling him to disappear for a while and not get caught by the police again. He couldn't do anything good, but he couldn't do anything bad either. Although the United States government wouldn't come out and ban a Canadian like him from coming to the United States because it might irritate the Canadians, the government still had to listen to the opposition of the people. If they really did something, it would be really difficult. Therefore, recently, other than occasionally exposing news, he didn't do anything else. The reason he came here today was mainly because he had the same goal as Jiang Hai. He came to watch the All-Star game. He was also a hardcore basketball fan. Even the starting point guard of the Eastern Conference this year, the former Rockets player Kyle Lowry, was able to become a starter in the All-Star game thanks to him. If he was taken away by the police again at this time, although he would only be drunk and wouldn't be sentenced, his influence on the public would still be very bad. At the very least, he wouldn't be able to watch the NBA All-Star game. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but have a headache. But for someone like him, His greatest ability was to be able to adapt. As the saying goes, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. After his mind gradually calmed down, he knew that if he really wanted to fight with Zhang Hai, it would really be very troublesome. So, admitting defeat now might be a good choice. Thinking of this, his eyes turned, and he said to Zhang Hai with a smile, "What happened just now was my fault. I'm sorry, we all came out to play, there's no need to be so stiff. I was wrong, I'm sorry, I apologize to you, and your expenses tonight will be mine." "Tonight's expenses will be mine." No. I just said that this gentleman's expenses will be mine. Mine. Hearing Justin Bieber's words, the fat manager also said with a smile. This guy was indeed an artist. His reaction was fast. It was better to cover up such a scandal. After all, reputation was very important to the nightclub and him. "No, then I have to give something. It's not about money. I'm apologizing. Seeing the fat manager shift the expenses to his side, his eyes quietly rolled, and then he said with a smile. It was said that it was difficult to slap a smiling face. Since this guy had admitted defeat, Zhang Hai was honestly at a loss. After all, even if we call the police, he will only spray wine into the room. At most, we will be fined some money and his reputation will be damaged. Moreover, you hit him, so even if we call the police, it won't be of much use. It won't do us any good. Most importantly, his reputation has already been ruined, so it won't make a difference. Why don't we just forget about it?" Just as Zhang Hai was hesitating, Moses Adams walked to Zhang Hai's side and whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. Indeed, what Justin Bieber did was at most a scandal. It was not to the extent that he should be locked up or sentenced. Spraying alcohol on others was really not a big deal. So after hearing Moses Adams's words, Zhang Hai also knew that this matter was probably over. "Are you okay?" Taking a deep breath, Zhang Hai looked at the two men unhappily and turned to look at Moses Adams. When Moses Adams heard Zhang Hai's words, to be honest, he was a little touched. To put it bluntly, lawyers like them were lackeys of the rich. They wanted to live, be famous, and make money, so they could not do without the rich. It was not that there were no lawyers who only helped the poor, but such people were destined to not make much money. Those cases of asset mergers and acquisitions, cases with the government, and cases with other companies, which one of them was not thick and dark? No one's ass was clean. It depended on who could find more loopholes and be more ruthless to gain more benefits. Therefore, for Moses Adams' employers, the only thing they cared about was whether or not he could gain more benefits for themselves. Unlike Zhang Hai, they would still pay attention to his thoughts, his heart, and whether or not he felt wronged. "I'm fine." But after all, he was not a rookie who had just entered society. The moment Moses Adams was touched, he suppressed this mentality and then smiled at Zhang Hai, indicating that he was fine. Since he said that he was fine, Zhang Hai did not say anything and went straight to the fat manager. "Give us another private room." "I want the same, clean one," Zhang Hai said word by word as he looked at the manager. "No problem, this way please." Although the private rooms here needed to be reserved, today's incident was indeed a little sudden. Since Zhang Hai was willing to take a step back, the fat manager here naturally had the mentality of making peace. He immediately took Zhang Hai and his group to another room. Zhang Hai's side dishes were all replaced with new ones, and there were even more side dishes. At the same time, there was an extra bottle of red wine. This wine was sent by Justin Bieber, but it was sent by the bodyguard. Although he admitted defeat, Zhang Hai knew that he was not necessarily so willing. But it did not matter. Zhang Hai was not willing to give up. After this incident, the 13 beauties who were originally in the room were also frightened. In the end, there were only 2 people left here. Moses Adams did not care about the wine stains on his body. For him, after going back, he would send it for dry cleaning anyway. He sat directly on the sofa and flirted with the girl who stayed. As for the other girl who stayed, it was the Japanese girl named Maggie. She was also frightened just now. "Can you accompany me to the bathroom? I need to wash up." After this incident, the originally lively scene became much colder in an instant. Sitting on the sofa, Zhang Hai and Maggie also did not know what to say. Compared with the old fox Moses Adams, Zhang Hai was much more inexperienced. He sat there drinking beer helplessly. Fortunately, Maggie was very experienced. She stuck to Zhang Hai's side and whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. "Cough, I'll go with you?" Pointing to himself, Zhang Hai asked in disbelief. "Let's go." Seeing Zhang Hai's surprised and incredulous look, Maggie chuckled and pulled Zhang Hai into the bathroom in the private room. Seeing Zhang Hai's action, Moses Adams on the other side also let out a strange cry. Originally, he was just rubbing his hands on his legs, but after Zhang Hai left, he also went deeper inside. However, Zhang Hai did not see this scene because after he walked into the bathroom, he felt even more embarrassed. Now, he did not know whether it was because of the wine or other reasons, but he felt that his face was as hot as a fever. Chapter 160. Wow, this guy is crazy. I'm covered in wine. My whole body is a little sticky. It would be great if I could take a shower now, but there's no other way. Let's take a shower first. Compared to Zhang Hai's helplessness, Maggie here was more active. After entering the bathroom, she turned on the tap on the table in front of her, adjusted the warm water, and washed her face first. Now her face was covered in wine and makeup to a certain extent. Instead of this, it was better to just wash it off directly. Zhang Hai stood behind her and looked at the tight skirt. When she bent down, the curve of the skirt stretched out and vaguely saw her breasts. This made Zhang Hai feel a little thirsty, but there was no wine here, and he couldn't drink water, so he could only endure. He forcibly turned his gaze away and began to look at the bathroom. This bathroom was not big, but it was understandable. After all, it was just a bathroom in a private room. The whole bathroom was only divided into two parts. One was the toilet, and the other was the sink. Although there were not many things, the place was not small, and it was very spacious. Just as Zhang Hai was looking here, he felt a flash in front of his eyes. The next second, Maggie, who had already removed her makeup, stood in front of him. It was not like before, when she accidentally exposed herself and screamed in surprise. Instead, she took the initiative to take off her outer skirt. As she took it off, she said to Zhang Hai, "Can you help me get my clothes?" "Oh, okay." Sure enough, when she took off her clothes, Zhang Hai saw a pair of things that he hadn't seen for a long time, jumping into his line of sight. Don't look at Maggie's height. Only a little more than 1.5 meters, but her upper body is still very amazing. The arc is so strong that it makes people's hair stand on end. Feeling Zhang Hai's gaze, Maggie did not make any shy movements. She took off her outer skirt, leaving only a pair of purple-red lace translucent panties on her body. Zhang Hai even saw that in the translucent panties, she deliberately trimmed her hair. This caused Zhang Hai's throat to swallow his saliva even faster. However, Maggie acted as if she didn't see Zhang Hai's actions. While washing her body, she said to Zhang Hai, "I hate getting wine all over my body. It smells bad and it's very uncomfortable. By the way, can I go to the bathroom?" Zhang Hai didn't know how to respond when he saw her completely disregard the fact that her soft spot was distorted after being squeezed. All he could do was nod. Then, she took some tissue and wiped her body. Then, she walked past Zhang Hai and sat on the toilet. She completely disregarded the fact that Zhang Hai was still beside her. Just like that, she took off her last layer of defense. Not long after, there was the sound of water splashing. Her face revealed a hint of relief. Phew, this is the only bad thing about drinking beer. It's too easy to go to the toilet. Don't you want to go to the toilet? I see that you've drunk a lot of them. After solving her problem, Maggie didn't rush to stand up. Instead, she asked Zhang Hai curiously. I don't have one for the time being." Hearing Maggie's words, Zhang Hai didn't know what to say. Hearing Zhang Hai say that he didn't have one, Maggie showed a look of disbelief and said, "You don't have one? I don't believe it." She stretched out her hand directly and pressed on Zhang Hai's vital part. Zhang Hai wanted to dodge, but after all, he was shocked. He didn't have time to dodge and was pressed on his pants. Then, Maggie's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. "Wow, so big." I heard that men don't go to the toilet when they're doing it. How about I help you?" Maggie squinted her eyes and smiled, saying to Zhang Hai, "No, don't bother." Hearing Maggie's words, Zhang Hai really didn't know what to say now. However, Maggie didn't give him a chance to refuse. She directly pulled his clothes and pulled him in front of her. Looking at the nervous Jiang Hai, Maggie's eyes also curved into two crescent moons. Hee, you're welcome. I still have to tell you later. If you are so nervous and uncomfortable now, how are you going to spend the night? Listening to Maggie's explicit words, Jiang Hai, who was originally embarrassed to the point of wanting to retreat, suddenly stopped. While Jiang Hai hesitated, Maggie had already unbuttoned Jiang Hai's pants and released a behemoth from the black boxers. Originally, Jiang Hai's size was just the same as the size of an ordinary Huaxia person. It was 16 centimeters long and 2.5 fingers wide, but since he got the Dragon Balls, his big brother seemed to be undergoing a second development. Unknowingly, it has grown to 3 fingers wide. Although the width didn't grow much, the length has reached 23 centimeters. Even compared with some North Americans, Jiang Hai's behemoth is definitely a behemoth. It wouldn't be a problem for him to shoot a movie. Wow, it's a little scary. Looking at the behemoth that popped out, Maggie was also shocked. Then her eyes lit up, and her 2 small hands unknowingly climbed on the monster's body. Then she licked her lips gently and sent it up. Hiss, this won't do. I've never done this before. The instant feeling made Jiang Hai's nerves tense up. Now his waist is a little numb. He knew that this is not good news, so he couldn't help but say immediately. But hearing Jiang Hai's words, Maggie didn't stop, but continued to move, and while moving, she said vaguely, "It doesn't matter, as long as you are happy, I don't hate this." Hearing Maggie say so, Jiang Hai didn't refute, but began to enjoy this feeling. He hasn't touched a woman for several years, so this time, he endured to the limit, but he only endured for 5 minutes before he was defeated. But although it was fast, after it was over, it was still as hard as iron, which also made Maggie have the idea to discuss it further. But if they discuss it further, they can't discuss it in the bathroom. After the 2 of them put on their clothes, they left the bathroom. But when they came into the private room, they found that Moses Adams had already left, and just now, Jiang Hai received a message from him on his mobile phone, telling Jiang Hai that he went back to the hotel first. The 2 of them had a tacit understanding. At that moment, Jiang Hai also left the nightclub with Maggie, went out, took a taxi, and returned to the hotel. After entering the hotel, the 2 of them could finally take a good shower. As for the clothes they changed out of, naturally, the hotel waiter would take them to dry clean. What happened next was naturally more exciting than in the bathroom. In accordance with the principle of not describing anything above holding hands, it was just a brief description. When Jiang Hai woke up the next morning, he felt that this was the most comfortable night he had slept in the past 2 years. This was not to say how much he loved the woman in his arms, or how many women he had in his arms, but it was the first time he hugged something to sleep. Well, after being a dog for a long time, it was really exciting to be a human once in a while. Although the 2 of them didn't seem to have much of a story to continue really, it seemed that the 2 of them didn't have any follow-up story. Early the next morning, Jiang Hai and Maggie had a meal. The 2 of them exchanged phone numbers, and then the girl left. She didn't ask for a penny from Jiang Hai, nor did she have any other requests. After all, she didn't specialize in this. It turned out that she still enjoyed this night. Moreover, the breakfast was paid for by Jiang Hai, so they just exchanged phone numbers and left. As for Jiang Hai, after breakfast, he followed the similarly refreshed Moses Adams to the place that sold airplanes that American Express had introduced to him a while ago. This place was a special exhibition hall in the urban area. It was not much different from the exhibition hall of a 4S store. It was just that the cars were replaced with airplanes. However, buying airplanes was not buying cars after all. Airplanes took up too much space, and it was impossible to line them up in a row for you to choose. So basically, these places that sold airplanes only had about 10 or 8 of the more popular ones parked there. However, there would be more helicopters parked there. If you had special requirements to buy airplanes, you also needed to make an appointment in advance. In fact, most of the airplanes placed here were either in stock or had been ordered by the customer. Before the customer took them away, they were placed here to keep up appearances. Although it was Jiang Hai's first time buying this thing, it wasn't Moses Adams's first time. On the way, Moses Adams also asked Jiang Hai what kind of plane he wanted to buy. When he heard that Jiang Hai wanted to buy an at 802F, he nodded gently. Jiang Hai's manor was not small, so it was suitable to buy an airplane. When they arrived at the place where they bought the plane, there was already a service staff waiting for them. Since Zhang Hai had already decided what kind of plane he wanted to buy, there was no need to talk nonsense. There was cash for the at 802F here, and Zhang Hai could just go and see it. The price of this at 802F is $460,000. If you want to buy a farm machine, you can enjoy a certain discount, but you have to pay for it first. It will only be reduced when you pay the tax. Zhang Hai and Moses. Adams looked at the big guy in front of them. Even Zhang Hai could not help but let out a soft, "Oh." The things made by different countries all had their own special features. For example, no matter what the Russians made, there was only one word to describe it. Big, and then sturdy. In Europe, the things made by France were only two words to describe it. Good-looking but not practical, and whether it was sturdy or not was another matter. Looking good was the most important thing. The things made by the British were only two words to describe it. Grand. They wanted to show the spirit of the world's overlords. The things made by the Germans were strict, but not good-looking. The things made by the Italians were weird, not suitable for the battlefield, not practical, but very much in line with the taste of the fashion world. As for the things made by the Americans, well, they could be capricious because no one knew what the next thing they would make would be. Think about the P-47 and the F-22. In fact, the people of the Americans were the most unpredictable. As for Huaxia, the main thing is that they will build whichever country they like. Chapter 161. Height 4. 12 meters. Length 12. 3 meters. Wingspan 20 meters. Although he already knew the specific data of this behemoth, Zhang Hai still felt a little nervous. This is an airplane. He really didn't think that one day he would be able to afford this thing. Licking his dry lips, Zhang Hai looked at the salesperson beside him. I want this airplane, but I also need a helicopter. Is there anything you can recommend? This airplane's empty weight alone is more than 3 tons. If it flies around, just the cost of diesel alone is not less than the money Zhang Hai earns when he goes fishing. Therefore, this airplane is destined to only fly once every few days, mainly to spread medicine and bait. As for patrols and the like, it is cheaper to use a helicopter, and the price of this thing is not expensive. Oh, there are also many brands of helicopters. If you are using it in the manner, a single-engine helicopter is enough. Of course, if you want to buy more, we are also very welcome. We will give you a satisfactory discount. Hearing that Zhang Hai also needs a helicopter, the salesperson's face suddenly brightened up. This is good news. If you talk about helicopters, the best is naturally the Bell series. This kind of helicopter has a large interior, a wide range of uses, and a wide variety. Even if you drive it out, you won't lose face. If you don't like the Bell series and feel that it is a little silly, the Hummingbird series is also not bad. There are also Enstrom, Robinson, McDowell, E.C., Schwarzer, Sikorsky. We even have Huaxia, Air China, Zhejiang Red Eagle, and Hafei. We have all of them here. Hafei. Hearing this person's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. He really didn't expect to see a domestic airplane here. There has always been a rumor that domestic engines are not good enough. It is difficult to make cars, let alone airplanes. How can there be domestic airplanes in the United States now? Although he wants to make a sample of domestic airplanes, to be honest, he is not confident in his heart. Hafei, it's true. Yes. Hafei. To be honest, Chinese products are very reliable, especially foreign exchange products. I'm not saying this just because you are Chinese. This Hafei helicopter is indeed not bad. It's a light aircraft with a length of 13.012 meters, a height of 3.14 meters, a rotor diameter of 10.69 meters, an empty weight of 1180 kilograms, a takeoff weight of 2 tons, and a maximum takeoff weight of 2 tons. Its cruising speed is 220 to 240 kilometers per hour, and its maximum cruising distance is 560 kilometers per hour, and its endurance is 3.7 hours. This is a pretty good standard. Look at Bell 206, which is about the same price as this one. No matter if it's Type A, Type B, or Type C, they are all smaller than this one. The largest Type C only has a takeoff weight of 1814 kilograms, and a flying speed of 225 kilometers per hour. Its only advantage is that it can cruise a little more than 620 kilometers. But to be honest, you are going to patrol the fishing grounds, and it's so close to the fishing grounds. Is there a big difference between the 60 kilometers route and the fishing route? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the salesman also spoke. Sure enough, Zhang Hai picked up the list handed over by the salesman. He looked at it. Sure enough, the Bell 206, which was known as the seller of helicopters, had a total of 3 types. The cheapest Type A was $800,000, and the most expensive Type C was $1,200,000. This helicopter was even more expensive than fixed-wing aircraft. Of course, there were also cheaper ones. The cheapest type was the Bell 47, which could be bought for more than $60,000. But Zhang Hai didn't like it because it was too ugly. Moreover, this helicopter only had a maximum takeoff weight of 1,340 kilograms, a maximum horizontal flight speed of 169 kilometers per hour, a range of 402 kilometers, and only 4 seats. This was the most economical and practical helicopter. However, after Zhang Hai saw the Bell 206 and Ha-Fei's helicopter, he had no interest in this. Then, he looked at Ha-Fei's helicopter. Sure enough, except for the maximum range, which was 60 kilometers shorter than the Type 206C, the rest of the models were all in red. Moreover, it was cheaper than the Type 206C at only $650,000. Although it was still more expensive than a fixed-wing aircraft, it was still within Zhang Hai's acceptable range. The most important thing was that Zhang Hai saw the name of this helicopter, ZHI-11. F*CK. G11. When he saw the pinyin, Zhang Hai cursed subconsciously. Sir, do you know this helicopter? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the salesman was stunned for a moment and asked curiously. Of course I know. This is it. Although Zhang Hai was not a military fan, he used to be a netizen. How could he not know about the famous G11? This was the ambitious work of Xueqi Airlines. On some iron-blooded military websites, it was even called the most powerful armed helicopter that could challenge the Apache. It was a pure military product. Perhaps in China, some civilian manufacturers might not be very reliable, but Zhang Hai had never heard of anything that was not reliable. Since he had encountered it now, it was absolutely impossible for him not to buy it. Since he had already decided, Zhang Hai did not say anything more. He directly placed the order and paid the deposit. Next, he only needed to wait for these 2 helicopters to be delivered to his manor and let Bell and Marin Rupert inspect them. Then he could pay the rest of the money. After solving a major problem in his heart, Zhang Hai was officially relieved. After coming out of this exhibition hall, he and Moses Adams were not in a hurry to go back. Instead, they took a good look around the world's largest city. Anyway, they had nothing else to do today. Although Zhang Hai had been in the United States for some time, he was not optimistic about the tourism industry here. But since he came here, he had to leave some marks. After they came out, they went to see the Statue of Liberty, then went to see Ground Zero. The so-called Ground Zero refers to the ruins of the World Trade Center that collapsed after September 11th. But now it had become an open space. In the middle of the open space, there was a sign that said, "We will never forget." It could be seen that this incident was really an indelible mark for the people of the United States. Then, they went to Lanark Square, which was actually the New York Times Square. Of course, in China, it was more translated as New York Times Square, but it really had nothing to do with the Times. At most, there would be a lot of people waiting to ring the bell every year during the New Year. After visiting here, they went back to Fifth Avenue, where they went yesterday. But today, they did not come here to buy things. They came here to have fun. The Empire State Building, the Public Library, Rockefeller Center, and Central Park. Zhang Hai came here today to visit all of them. In fact, he only visited half of them. Because there were many art museums and galleries near Central Park, it was almost like playing the lute to a cow. So, Zhang Hai just looked outside and gave up the idea of going in. With his temperament, he was destined to have no fate with art. It was better not to look at things that were full of 13 boxes. After visiting these attractions, it was already night time. Before inviting Moses Adams to the subway station in Flushing, they had an authentic barbecue. After that, Moses Adams took Zhang Hai to Broadway to watch an opera. Ahem, they slept in an opera. He was really not interested in this kind of thing, but today, he was very happy. After all, they came out to have fun. Happiness was the most important thing. After he and Moses Adams returned to the hotel in the evening, he went to take a shower first. Then, he took out the business card that the girl gave him when he bought the watch yesterday. According to Moses Adams, if he did not take advantage of this, he would be punished by God. Zhang Hai was a person who respected ghosts and gods the most. He was very afraid of God's punishment, so he took advantage of this opportunity. Originally, the girl thought that Zhang Hai, her sugar daddy, would not reply. After receiving the call, she was very excited. That night, she went to Zhang Hai's room. After having a midnight snack with him, she carefully explained the function of this watch to him. In the end, Zhang Hai still only understood the date and the normal time. He still did not understand the rest, and he was not willing to understand. Compared to the watch, he was more willing to understand the girl's own depression. After a process that could not be described in words, it was February 13th. Of course, this referred to the American time. In the distant Huaxia, it was already February 14th today. For Zhang Hai, getting up with different girls in the morning was something that he did not even dare to think about before. Of course, he would not always think about this in the future. He was now giving himself a vacation. When he returned to the manor, he probably would not think about it anymore. In the morning, after eating breakfast with the girl, he specially took her out for a walk. This girl was different from Maggie. Maggie was a simple one-night stand, but this girl didn't leave in the morning. If she didn't get something, she wouldn't leave so easily. In fact, for such an obvious effect, Zhang Hai still liked it very much, because it was not troublesome. After the two separated at noon, Zhang Hai returned to the hotel because that night was the first day of the All-Star weekend. That night, one of the preliminaries for the All-Star game, the Celebrity Challenge, would be held at 7 p.m. The Rookie Challenge would be held at 9 p.m. Tomorrow, at 7:30 p.m., the All-Star weekend would officially begin. The shooting star, skills competition, three-point competition, and slam dunk competition would all be held tomorrow. Of course, the venue was different. Although the competition would start at Madison Square Garden, today's and tomorrow's competitions would be held at the Nets' home court, Brooklyn's Barclays Center. Although the NBA's influence in the United States was not as big as football or baseball, it was only slightly stronger than ice hockey. But after all, it was one of the 4 major leagues in the United States. In addition, tomorrow was Valentine's Day. The atmosphere of the All-Star Game and Valentine's Day pushed New York to its peak. Zhang Hai had lived for so long, but this was the first time he felt so good. Chapter 162. Phew, I'm a little nervous. With the ticket in his hand, Zhang Hai came to the first row of the basketball team's Barclays Arena. His eyes were also looking around. He was so nervous that his palms were sweating. He kept wiping them on his pants. As for Moses Adams, although his seat was next to Zhang Hai, he was still a lawyer. Even though he had a good personal relationship with Zhang Hai, he still knew a lot of people. As soon as he entered, he greeted everyone. On the other hand, Zhang Hai came to sit here first. Although he had the ticket in his hand, it was his first time sitting here. He was a little scared. Hey, is this your first time watching a game live? Just as Zhang Hai's eyes were looking around, a white man walked over from a distance with a smile and sat next to Zhang Hai. This guy looked a little older than Zhang Hai, but not by much. The clothes he wore were not much different from the other fans. He was also wearing the uniform of this year's Western Conference All-Star. However, what surprised Zhang Hai was that he was fully armed. The weather outside was very cold, so he was not afraid of freezing. Yeah, it's my first time watching a game so close. He was embarrassed to say that he had never watched an NBA game before. He could only find an excuse and say that it was his first time watching a game so close. Haha, then let's enjoy it. The All-Star game is not for you to be nervous. It's for you to have fun. The man patted Zhang Hai's shoulder and laughed. When he heard his words, Zhang Hai's original nervousness relaxed a little. You're from Huaxia? Seeing Zhang Hai's expression, he relaxed a little. The man did not hold back and sat directly next to Zhang Hai. Yes. Zhang Hai was a little surprised to hear that he was from Huaxia, because in the United States, although the proportion of Chinese people was the largest among all the Asians, when an American asked where an Asian came from, They would mostly say Japan or Korea, and rarely would they ask if he was from Huaxia. Although he had no love for these two countries, the attitude of these two countries towards outsiders was still very worthy of recognition. At least it gave others a feeling that they were very polite. Oh, I've been to Huaxia where I rose. I've been to Taiwan province there. Are you from there? Hearing that Jiang Hai really came from Huaxia, the white man also became enthusiastic. No, Tai province is the southern tip of Huaxia. I'm from the northernmost city. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said to the man. Oh, that's a pity, but Tai province is really fun. There are a lot of delicious food there. The climate is average, too hot, but the girls are very enthusiastic, and their voices are very fun. Hearing that Jiang Hai was not from Tai province, the man was a little disappointed, but then he put it behind him and began to talk to Jiang Hai about Tai province. But speaking of Tai province, Jiang Hai has never been to Tai province. Hey Para, it's time to warm up. Just as the man and Jiang Hai were chatting happily, a black man shouted at the guy in the distance. Hearing this voice, the white man also stood up. Are you going to play in the game? Seeing that this guy was really going to warm up, Jiang Hai was also a little curious. Yeah, after chatting for so long, we can be considered friends. Remember to cheer for me later. Seeing Jiang Hai's curious gaze, the guy couldn't help but say proudly. Then, he quickly ran to the court and did a warm-up shot. At this time, Moses, Adams finally finished greeting and sat back next to Jiang Hai. Looking at the white man, he was obviously stunned. He looked at Jiang Hai and asked curiously, Do you know Robert Para? Robert Para? Who is that? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai thought about it carefully. It seems that he doesn't know this person. It's the guy who talked to you just now. He's the owner of the Grizzlies, Robert Para, the most eligible bachelor in the IT industry. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses, Adams couldn't help but complain in his heart. You don't know him. Why are you chatting so happily with him? Seeing Moses, Adams's expression, Jiang Hai smiled a little awkwardly. It's better to have someone to chat with than to sit here alone. However, after hearing Moses, Adams's words, he still took out his phone to check. In the end, Jiang Hai was also shocked by the results. This Robert Para was really a powerful person. Compared to Jiang Hai who had a cheat, this man rose to prominence with his own ability. This man was born in 1977, only 11 years older than Jiang Hai. In 2003, he joined Apple as a hardware engineer and was responsible for the work related to the Wi-Fi base station. He resigned in 2005 and used $30,000 as startup capital to make a sample in his apartment. It was a classic example of an empty-handed person. With this sample and a website, he received 3,000 pre-ordered systems and an advance payment of $240,000. Then, he flew to Taiwan province and found a hardware company there to make his current main product, a wireless network device named Ubi. After listing on NASDAQ in 2011, it was out of control. Now, his net worth was as high as $9.2 billion. He was a famous eligible bachelor in the United States. When Jiang Hai saw this number, he was shocked. $9.2 billion. Well, at least he didn't have to think about it for the next few years. The reason he became a player was because of his identity, and also because he was now the owner of the Grizzlies. The rise of the Grizzlies in recent years was inseparable from him. Sometimes in an NBA team, it was indeed a very happy thing to have an owner who loved basketball. Whether it was Mark Cuban or Robert Para, at least they were willing to invest money in the team. Who else is in this Masters competition? After reading Robert Para's introduction, Jiang Hai elbowed Moses, Adams beside him and asked him. Although he didn't know these people, Moses, Adams was very familiar with them. Ahem. Did you see the two people in the Eastern Conference coach's seat? Moses, Adams asked with a smile when he heard Jiang Hai's doubts. I know those two, Cameron Anthony and Spike Lee. I also watched the live broadcast, okay? Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at Moses, Adams. As one of the top superstars in the NBA, how could he not know Anthony and New York's hardcore fan, Spike Lee? Hee, you know the Eastern Conference coach, but you definitely don't know the Western Conference coach. The coach over there is the two hosts of ESPN's Mike and Mike program, Mike Gritchie and Mike Grimber. The black man over there is Kevin Hart. He is an actor. He acted in Meet Your Father-in-Law and Scream. Moses. Adam smiled awkwardly and immediately introduced the others. Sure enough, other than these two people, Jiang Hai really didn't know the other people. He knew Scream, but he only had some impression of the female lead in the movie. He didn't have any impression of the others, let alone this black man. Anthony is an Anthony. He is also an actor. He also acted in Scream. That is Ansel Elgort. He acted as Witch Carrie. Although his acting skills are not good, he is handsome. TSK, that is Chadwick Boseman. He is also an actor, but I guess you haven't seen the movies he acted in. The Indian is Abhishek Bachchan. He is known as the Brad Pitt of Bollywood, but I haven't seen the movies he acted in. I guess you haven't seen them either. There are also some famous players in the NBA. The uncle over there is Chris Mullin. That is Allen Houston. He was once the king of center shooting in New York. There are also some WNBA players. With Moses Adams' introduction, Jiang Hai had a general understanding of these people. Basically, the celebrity game was just a game for fun. No one took it too seriously. Other than celebrities from all walks of life, there were also some retired NBA stars or WNBA stars who needed to increase their popularity. Because of this, there weren't many spectators attending the Masters tournament. The attendance rate barely reached 60%. During the tournament, other than the occasional cheers, there weren't any other cheers. In the end, the Western Conference celebrity team won the game 57-51. Jiang Hai just sat there and watched the fun. Most of the time when he did things, he was only passionate about it. Thinking back to when he was watching others play basketball, he went home and built a basketball court. After the basketball court was built, although he would occasionally practice, he didn't pay much attention to it. After all, his physical fitness was there for all to see. As long as he practiced his dribbling well, he would be able to crush anyone in a one-on-one. This was inevitable. He didn't have any plans to enter the NBA, so he just wanted to have fun. Through the fan vote, the final score of the match was 15 points. Alright, out of a total of 57 points, 15 points was indeed a high score that was hard to come by. With 15 points and 2 rebounds, Kevin Hart was selected as the MVP of the Masters tournament for the 4th time in a row. It looked like he was flying as well. As for the participants of the Masters competition, they bowed to the audience and returned to the changing room. Of course, the stadium didn't fall silent. Instead, a cheerleading dance was performed. This time, the NBA All-Star Games cheerleading team consisted of 2 teams. One was the Brooklyn Nets. After all, this was their home court. The other was the New York Knicks. Therefore, in terms of appearance, these girls were quite good. After their dance performance, it was time for the first round of the All-Star Game, the Rookie All-Star Game. Before the rookie competition began, the rookies participating in this year's competition also came to the field to warm up. The seats, which were originally less than 60% full, were also increasing rapidly. Watching celebrities play basketball was definitely not as comfortable as watching official players play basketball, even if these players were only rookies. However, it was hard to say if there were any future All-Stars among these rookies. At the same time, the ticket price for the rookie game was much cheaper than the official game. Some people who had time would come to watch. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.